Reality Check Thursday midday edition, 11 o'clock hour. We'll be talking about urban farming and about Black farming, more specifically Black people in farming and Black people in farming in the 21st century. So let's make sure we amend that statement. We're going to be talking about the future of Black farming or Black farming moving forward, why that's important in a time like this. So appreciate seeing everyone, hearing everyone, also having everyone listen to us here on Reality Check this Thursday, midday edition. There is no City Council Live, of course, as you know. The Philadelphia City Council is on what they call legislative recess. It's a legislative recess, but they are still going about the business of the people as we are told. So they will be back for regular City Council sessions in September. So we do not have City Council Live throughout the summer. However, that does not discontinue business, your daily dose of public affairs, politics, and public policy here on Reality Check. That's 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app. Oh, by the way, I'm your host, executive producer, also creator of Reality Check, Charles Ellison. You can catch me, if you can, on Twitter.com at Ellison Report, hashtag Reality Check as well. So once again, we are plugged in, we are tuning in and broadcasting to you live through Zoom today as part of our special EcoWord broadcast, which we will have a little bit later on at the 11 o'clock hour. So definitely excited about that. We were scheduled to talk with, at the top of the 10 o'clock hour, Councilmember Helen Gill. Councilmember Helen Gill was scheduled at the top of this 10 o'clock hour, so we're waiting on her. Phone lines are open indeed, particularly if you have questions for the Councilwoman. 215-634-8065, toll free. It will be 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065, toll free is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Feel free to call in. Also, you may have an opportunity to talk with or ask questions of Councilmember Helen Gill. She's going to talk about the recent lawsuit that was filed by the Homeowners Association of Philadelphia. That's a landlord lobby or rental property owner lobby in the city of Philadelphia. They filed a lawsuit against the city for its Emergency Housing Protection Act. Remember, the Emergency Housing Protection Act was passed by City Council, also signing the law. Listen, we're going to take a break. We just want to kind of work through these technical issues because we are broadcasting through Zoom. I think we're going to switch some things up here a little bit. So let's just take a quick break. When we come back on the other side, we'll have those phone lines open, and hopefully we'll have the council line with us very shortly here on Reality Check on WURD. We're going to take a quick moment. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
Okay, welcome back. We worked through that glitch. I hope everything is coming through smoother and sounds much better. Welcome back to Reality Check. I'm Charles Ellison, 96.1 FM, 900 AM on your regular Philly radio dial, and WURDradio.com if you're listening not just in Greater Philly, Delaware Valley, but you're listening throughout the nation, throughout the world on our live stream and WURD TV, WURD app as well. Many ways to tap into the WURD, to tap into WURD. Joining us now is Councilmember Philadelphia, Councilmember at large, that is Helen Gim. For more information, go to phlcouncil.com/Helen Gim, G-Y-M. You can get more information on how to reach the council member's office and also what she's up to. She joins us now here on Reality Check. Councilwoman, how are you doing?
Good morning, Charles. I'm doing well, thank you.
All right. Good morning to you. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate this. You recently passed, along with your colleagues, the Emergency Housing Protection Act. Just real quick, just to refresh listeners, why is that act significant? Why is that law significant? What sort of impact has it had already?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as WURD and many others have pointed out, one of the key things we know about this COVID crisis is that it's concurrent with a housing crisis and an economic crisis. And in a city like ours that was so deeply impacted over a decade ago by the mortgage foreclosures and the scandals that went around in the 2010s period, many Black residents lost homes, and so they are renters. Philadelphia is part of Renter Nation. We're almost 50% renter. 300,000 people already struggle to pay their rent month to month. And then, of course, when you pile on the COVID crisis on top of it, now we've really put people underwater. And we know that one of the key things to keeping the public health and public safety at the forefront is having a habitable, safe, and stable home and a roof over your head, the lights turned on, air conditioning, internet. Like, these are new line items on the human rights agenda that governments and city councils and people should be focused on. So we moved very quickly on the Emergency Housing Protections Act because when people lose their jobs or they lose access to hours, they can't make rent. And as soon as, we announced that the city would close down, I introduced a call to do an eviction moratorium. That got picked up. Now, as the governor's moratorium expires tomorrow, it was really important that our central priority legislatively through City Council on our end was to move a big housing protection package forward because that impacts over half the people in the city of Philadelphia.
Now, you have the Homeowner Association of Philadelphia. That's the landlord's rental property owner lobby. They filed a lawsuit. What's their problem with it? They're saying that the city, and I'm quoting one of their lawyers, is taking away their property rights without compensating them. That's like one of their core arguments there. Did the council, did you sit down with that lobby, as you were crafting the Emergency Homeowners Act and, saying, okay, what is their perspective and, hey, how can we craft this legislation in such a way that's amenable to you?
Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say. HAPCO's lawsuit is not only frivolous, it's heartless. HAPCO's been part of, when I started the anti-eviction work in City Council when I came in my first term, we established an anti-eviction task force. It was established in 2017, early 2018. They've been on it from get-go. Some of the things that were provided right now, like we're putting out millions of dollars in rent subsidies, originated through that anti-eviction task force, but also so did other things like a pre-filing diversion program so you don't have to rush into eviction proceedings before you get someone counseling and a chance to sit down and negotiate out other options to eviction. But, and certainly when we were crafting the Emergency Housing Protections Act, we did our due diligence. We made sure we reached out to them. We had multiple conversations with groups of landlords about this so we could understand what the concerns were and how to limit. And we made amendments to accommodate many of their concerns. At the end of the day, though, they are running against what other people are saying. Pennsylvania Apartment Association, which is another landlord lobby, issued a public statement with Josh Shapiro saying, like, we should not be evicting, we should waive late fees, we really shouldn't be raising people's rent. Why does that make any sense right now? Try to find alternatives to eviction. So HAPCO is stomping its feet. They're upset. They don't feel comfortable with any types of regulations, and I think this proves it. Now, the one thing I would say very quickly to you is that Philadelphia ranks fourth in the nation in terms of evictions. Before this eviction crisis, we ran people through eviction court at 2 minutes a pop per case. We evict 1,500 people a month. That's 400 people a week. Most of them are women and black women with children. And we got to get control. We do not have regulations in the city of Philadelphia that are normal, that are common sense, and that are good solutions for renters and landlords.
I want to ask you real quick about something else with respect to that too. With most of the city renting or in a situation where they're a tenant, and we've got this hot summer coming up. I've noticed other cities kind of toying around with the idea of or implementing mandatory air conditioning unit clauses in leases. Like, if you're going to rent property, you have to have at least an air conditioning unit to keep apartments cool. That's a problem that I worry about, particularly with record heat waves that are hitting Philadelphia. We're expecting one this summer. Now we're in a pandemic, and so people can't get cooling spaces, and cooling locations citywide are limited. Obviously, they're closed down, they're shut down. Is that something that we've explored or something that we might look at in the future?
Well, it's certainly something I'm very strong. I have very strong feelings about. Last week was unbearable. It was unbearable for people, and there is no, like, the malls were not open. There's no public spaces for people to cool down. It's not a surprise that violence begins to spike. People are desperate. Rent is due. Everything is coming down on people. So, for me personally, I don't understand how people have to pay rent of maybe 50 to 60% of their income, and the home that they are paying money for is absolutely unlivable. It doesn't have heat. It doesn't have air conditioning. There's no obligation for, like, connectivity right now. None of this stuff. And I think we need a new standard. We should have had an old one long before, but this COVID crisis should have us motivated to have, like, really decent human standards for what is livable if you're asking people to pay money for it. And air conditioning should be at the top of the list.
It should be, like, just kind of a standard thing. I'm with you on that. And it's just something that every now and then it keeps me up at night. I have to be honest, particularly as someone who grew up in North Philadelphia and grew up without air conditioning in my household, so I know how that is. Hey, Councilwoman, before we let you go, got a couple more minutes. This sounds like a structural issue, right? I feel like there could be an opportunity here for, like, you as the city council or the city teaming up with the landlords, with the rental property owners, with folks like HAPCO, and really to put the onus on the banks. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's everyone owing the banks. Like, it's, if you're a property owner or a landlord, you've got to pay your mortgage to the bank, and really banks need to be the ones, the banking system has to be the one to let up on everyone and just say, hey, listen, we're all in this together. We're all in a pandemic. Let's ease up on people. Let's just kind of shut things down throughout the course of this pandemic, so we all get on the other side of it, and then we can flip the switch back on and go back to normal business. I mean, what about that? What about putting the pressure on the banks?
Yeah. Well, capitalism in housing is one of the main reasons why we are in this situation. When a fundamental human right to housing and a roof over your head and decent, humane living conditions are at the mercy of whether you can pay for it or not, or how much you pay, with no caps and no oversight, we're in this spot. So I will say that, for sure we would like this push. And, I think Philadelphia has been at the forefront. We extended the eviction moratorium until the end of August, so we're not throwing kids and families out in the middle of a hot summer with no place to go, and shelters not being a safe alternative or option for people. We're talking about payment plans. We're talking about interventions before we get to punitive evictions that are traumatic for families, women, and especially our children. And so,
but let me ask, could a city like
redirect us towards the banks and the profit motive around this? HAPCO should drop its suit. It's embarrassing, and
Let me ask you though, Councilwoman, real quick. Let me sort of interject there, though, Councilwoman. I mean, can a city like Philadelphia, can a legislative body like you, the Philadelphia City Council, I mean, can you have a direct conversation with the banks, with the financial sector, or is there like a group of banks that are like, statistically, I mean, have we seen the data like, okay, these are the, 5 or 10 banks that have the most control over mortgages in the city of Philadelphia. And so we need to have a direct conversation with them and just say, hey, let up, because you're putting pressure on the landlords who put pressure on the residents, on the tenants, and then that puts like larger pressures, unnecessary economic pressures on the city. I mean, is that kind of conversation taking place, or is it within the realm of possibility?
It's always within the realm of possibility. I don't think that when we came into this in early March about the eviction moratorium, I had people laughing at us that people aren't going to do any of this or anything like that. Yeah. Now I would say it's one of the top agendas right now, and the pressure has to go towards the banking industry for sure. But it also has to start with the fact that there are 36,000 individual landlords across the city of Philadelphia as well, and it's largely, there aren't a whole lot of rules. There's a lot of bad behavior, and we need people to be good actors and partners on this. Hampton should be a partner. They have been a partner in the past. They'll continue to be one because regardless of, the silliness of this lawsuit, we're going to continue to work with them because our members are important to us. Similarly with others, already there is a prohibition on mortgage foreclosures and a prohibition on mortgage foreclosure court even being open right now. And, while we are trying to figure things out for landlords and for folks who have lobbyists, we also ask that the same grace be applied to renters who don't often have big money lobbyists in the halls of City Hall and definitely not in Congress. So I think we can do this as long as we're taking an equal kind of approach, not one at the expense of the other, but like we try to find the solution together so we can focus our energy on the banking industry, the greed, and a market that has been so merciless and inhumane to too many people here in the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah. We've been talking with council member at large Helen Gim. Go to phlcouncil.com/Helen Gim for more information. You can also find her on social media at Helen Gim at large. On social media, on Twitter specifically, and she's been kind enough to give us a little bit of her time this morning. Always a pleasure talking with you, Councilwoman. I really appreciate it. We'll talk with you again. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, Charles.
All right, thank you. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back on the other side, phone lines are open, 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900. Give us some comments, give us some of your feedback or reactions to we just talked with Councilmember Helen Gim. Phone lines were open while we were talking with her, so if you had a question, you just missed her. But 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
If you want to start your morning with mindfulness, motivation, and inspiration, tune in to Daybreak with me, Helana, here on WURD Radio, Monday through Friday from 6 to 7 a.m. I'm a health and wellness coach with over 15 years experience helping people to transform their lives. On the show, we talk health and wellness 360, from getting your mind right to getting your money right. So let's rise and shine together right here on WURDradio.com, 96.1 FM, 900 on your AM dial on Daybreak every morning.
Word Radio Digital Tip of the Week with Stephanie Humphrey.
I'm your Tech Life expert, Stephanie Humphrey, and this is your Word Digital Tip of the Week. Video chatting on your smartphone is a wonderful way to stay in touch with family and friends, especially during this time. You actually get to see their faces and talk to them almost as if you were together. But video chatting can be a challenge if you have a different type of smartphone than the person you want to connect with. Your iPhone might not be compatible with someone else's Android phone or vice versa. When you download the Google Duo app, you can talk to anyone using any smartphone. The app is free to download and use and lets you video chat with loved ones as easily as you'd talk to them on the phone. Download Google Duo from the App Store on your iPhone or the Play Store on your Android phone. Give the app access to your contacts and camera, and make sure the person you want to video chat with has the app on their smartphone too. Get Google Duo today. Your friends and family can't wait to see you. Stay tuned to WURD for more tech tips and stay connected with us at wordradio.com.
The Word Digital Tip of the Week is brought to you by Comcast NBC Universal. Listen live at wordradio.com.
Your child deserves to be educated in a safe learning environment. Southwest Leadership Academy Charter School is a tuition-free public school. Both our locations offer dual-gender environments with single-gender classrooms. Our students score in the top state testing percentile among area schools. Apply online at bit.ly/enrolls SLA in all caps. That's bit.ly/enroll SLA.
Reality check.
With Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
Yeah, phone lines are open. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065. Toll free, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. We have to date, as of yesterday, the official homicide count in the city of Philadelphia is now at 216. 216 murders have occurred in the city of Philadelphia in the year 2020. So that's a 29% increase. That's a 29% increase over where it was this time last year. That was about 167 homicides this time last year. It's now 216. We are well past the 200 mark of murders, of official murders that have been tallied by the Philadelphia Police Department. That's as of yesterday, July 8th. The last time where we went above 200 murders at this time of the year was 2007. It was 2007, so it was about 13 years ago where that happened in Philadelphia, 2007. And the only other time where it's been, or the only other times where it's been under 150 murders or homicides by this time of a year was during the periods between 2013 and 2016. So things kind of like seemed to just slow down a little bit in Philly. In fact, in 2014, right around this time, we had about 119 homicides. One homicide, just one homicide is one too many. But it's just so striking when you look at those numbers, when you look at those data points to show that how severe it is in the city of Philadelphia. And those numbers are always very important. I remember having a conversation, I think it was another listener who was saying that, sometimes the numbers, the percentages can remove the human face. And that is something that we have to be wary of. We always have to be on guard about that and be very careful of. Sometimes you can get too immersed in the data points and too immersed in the statistics where you forget the human beings, the people, the communities that are being afflicted by those kinds of tragedies and by that kind of crisis as well. But statistics are always important to, one, help give context, to understand that there's like a bigger, broader problem or trend that is occurring. And sometimes too, people will be in the midst of a crisis or experiencing an emergency or going through a very difficult, very rough time in their lives or in their household. They may be experiencing that alone. They could be experiencing that with family members, with immediate family members. And then sometimes they can feel like they're the only ones going through that because sometimes we don't talk to one another. We are less community than we were, say, just 20, 30 years ago, right? I blame some of that on the hyper digital age that we live in, the age of social media induced narcissism, and how it's become much more individualistic. I mean, that vibe was always there, particularly as far as American society and American psyche is concerned. But it has escalated, and it's escalated in very disturbing ways. So people feel like they're on their own. They feel like, oh, I see like other friends, having a great time and, kind of showing it up on Instagram, and I'm feel left out of that. And in the meantime, like when we're talking with Councilmember Helen Young, I'm having trouble paying my rent, and I'm on the cusp of, potential eviction from a landlord who's going to defy city law in this. But when we look at these data points, when we look at these statistics, we realize, wow, you know what? I'm not the only one who's going through this. There's a lot of other people, my neighbors, my friends, my family, everyone's going through this. We may not be talking to one another about it, but we're all going through it. And so that creates a sense of togetherness. And then, power comes in numbers, and then people figure out and realize, hey, you know what, we need to band around this and we need to figure a way out of it. And so I think that's why there's power in numbers, not just in terms of us as a collective, but there's power in numbers in terms of understanding the science of trends and patterns and, the larger, broader occurrence of things. That's always very important. I know sometimes people hear those percentages and those data points and they're like, I don't need to hear that. I need to hear the real human stories, and we do need to hear those. But we also, people who are going through these times, these difficult times, need to understand that they are not alone. And we really have to do a better job of figuring out ways to, especially during a time like this pandemic time, and this was before the pandemic hit, this was before stay at home, this was before quarantine. People feeling this sense of sadness through isolation. Some of that isolation sometimes self-imposed, and a lot of that isolation and alienation being community imposed or societal imposed. That's a very big problem. That's something we have to think about. And so, getting through times like these require us being community, thinking community, acting community, right? Being compassionate in a community-like way. So that's what's going to get us through this. That's really what's going to get us through a time like this. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. We had some technical issues a little bit early on, so we got that all ironed out, and we are smooth sailing, God willing, here on the remainder of this Thursday edition of Reality Check. A little bit later on, I think in about a little bit under 10 minutes, we're going to be talking with Paris Denard. I think we're scheduled to talk with Paris Denard, who is the Senior Communications Advisor for Black Media Affairs at the Republican National Committee. So we'll be talking with Paris Denard of the RNC of the Republican Party. We talked with yesterday, we talked with the Black Caucus Chair of the Democratic Party, Virgie Rollins. So today we're going to be talking to her counterpart, her arch nemesis, Paris Denard, at the who is Black Media Affairs Advisor for the Republican National Committee, and we're going to be talking about the Black employment rate, the Black unemployment rate. So we're going to be talking about that. So obviously the spin coming from that side of things is that things are great. So we're going to be talking with Paris about that. That's going to be happening a little bit later on in the 10 o'clock hour. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Oh, wow. I was waiting on this. We were expecting that, and I'm just saying it just came out about a few months ago. We have breaking news, by the way. We have breaking news.
This is WURD Breaking News.
Yeah, we have breaking news coming out of the Supreme Court. This is pretty significant. This is coming out of Washington, D.C. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a grand jury in New York City can see President Trump's tax returns. Can see President Trump's tax returns. We were waiting that decision that just came out about a few moments ago. Supreme Court decisions being released today at around 10 a.m. So I was looking for that, and so I'm just now seeing that the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that a grand jury in New York City can see President Trump's tax returns, although the decision was sent back, the Supreme Court sending the decision back to the lower courts that ruled on it, since President Trump can still appeal. I mean, well, how about that? People, just making it clear that the president can't appeal a Supreme Court decision. So that's knowing that the Supreme Court is the law of the land. But I'm sarcastic about that. Trump does not have, this is what the Supreme Court is saying, Trump does not have categorical or, quote, categorical immunity against the criminal subpoena, as his lawyers argued. Still, the president can argue the specific of these subpoenas. However, the Supreme Court will not allow Congress to get Trump's tax and financial records for now. So that's a big deal, kind of splitting the decision here. It was a 7-2 decision, and Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh voted to release the president's financial records. So significant in some ways and not so significant in others. Just sort of looking, it's kind of like the Supreme Court playing both sides here, because at the end of the day, Congress still doesn't get an opportunity to look at the president's tax returns. And I think that that's what a lot of folks were going for, so the legislative branch can conduct its oversight. However, a grand jury in New York City can see the tax returns. But the only thing is that the president's still being given an opening to appeal since the decision is going back to the lower courts. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in any form or fashion a legal expert, but that doesn't sound like, I mean, it's significant news-wise and headline-wise. Maybe it just sets a different tone, but I mean, it doesn't, it's not really disrupting the status quo in any real big way. I mean, that's just me on my first kind of glance at this, like, okay, well, can the folks see his tax returns or not? You know, and apparently it sounds like, yeah, kind of. Well, let's just send it back to the original courts who ruled on this, and we'll let the president appeal, and then we'll let it figure its way out. So it's just kind of like the thing is just still dragging. It's just kicking the can. So, yeah, that's the breaking news out of Washington today, out of the Supreme Court. 215-634-8065. It's not really all that big a deal. It's just giving the president a lot more room and a lot more time to do what he does best. So, I mean, the New York prosecutor can see the president's financial records, but when you read in between the lines, you look a little bit deeper. It's still the case is being kicked back to the lower courts for more decision on it, and the president can still be allowed to appeal. So, you know, he's still getting the benefit to do what he does best, which is to litigate and to wear people out in the courts, and that's what he's doing. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Also, other big news, another 1.3 million people nationwide applying for new jobless benefits in their states last week. 1.3 million people. Overall, last week, you had about 2.4 million people nationwide applying for unemployment benefits. So that's high. And it's, you know, the number of Americans who've been applying for unemployment insurance has remained above 1 million. Like each week when those numbers come out, it's remained above 1 million for 16 weeks. So we've got about 1% of the population is infected with COVID. It's about 3 million people now. That's 1 full percent of the population now infected with COVID-19. And we've got an even higher number of people out of the American population who are dealing with job loss or dealing with some kind of financial stress of some sort. So that's also a big concern. I know we're supposed to be talking with, that's going to be the topic of focus in our discussion with Paris Denard, who's going to be coming up next in a few moments here on Reality Check. 215-634-80, while we got about a minute or so. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Actually, we're going to go ahead to break, and then we can allow some time for Paris Denard to join us. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll be here on Reality Check talking with Black Media Affairs Advisor for the RNC for the Republican Party, Paris Denard. Coming up next here on Reality Check, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tune in this and every Saturday at 3 p.m. for the Let's Talk Fire Safety Show with host Adam Thiel, Fire Commissioner, discussing fire and life safety.
1 in 23 will be diagnosed with colorectal cancer in their lifetime, yet more than 60% of deaths from colorectal cancer could be avoided with preventative screening. A colonoscopy can save your life. Skip the pre-visit and schedule your screening directly at einstein.edu/colon. Colon cancer is preventable. Learn more at einstein.edu/colon.
These are unprecedented times, challenging how the YMCA works to strengthen community as we have for nearly 170 years. But we've always found ways to help people and communities in times of crisis. Right now, Ys across the country are providing emergency childcare, shelter, food programs, and outreach to seniors. But we can't do it alone. Whether you're connected to the Y or have a fond Y memory, we need you to stay with us. Reach out to your local Y today and stay with us for a better us.
Be heard. Want another way to join the conversation?
Follow us on social media
Using the hashtag onWURD.
Be heard.
Stay connected to Word Radio.
Independent Black Media. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM within Philly proper. However, if you're listening in beyond the greater Philly area and also Delaware Valley, you're listening throughout the nation, it is WordRadio.com. Also, Word TV and Word app on your favorite digital device. Some of you also listening into us or watching us live on Word TV. Facebook Live is facebook.com/4word or youtube.com/onWord as well. Joining us now is Paris Denard. He's Senior Communications Advisor for Black Media Affairs at the Republican National Committee. Go to GOP.com for more information on the Republican Party, on the Republican National Committee, and what they're up to and how they're preparing for what promises to be a very caustic 2020 election year. Paris, how are you doing?
I'm good, and thanks for having me on the program. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate this. You now are all touting that jobs, based on the federal data that was released recently, 4.8 million jobs added in June. And so talk a little bit about that. Why do you find that that's a promising line or silver lining as far as the state of the U.S. economy right now?
Well, what we know is, and that's a very good question, I think there's so much uncertainty right now for many Americans, especially I would just talk about Black Americans who are faced with, rent and mortgages and their job. If they're not able to go in and work because they're in office or, working at a grocery store or something like that, that has been deemed essential to be open. Then you have to have the option of working from home. If you don't have that option of teleworking, then you're stuck without a job right now. And that's nerve-wracking for a lot of Americans. I totally get it. And I think that what we have to look at is the fact that even with all the uncertainty and the government, the federal government did a lot in terms of PPP and extending unemployment benefits, increasing that to $600 on top of that, and trying to do a lot to mitigate the pain, the economic pain. We see that in the May and the June job numbers that the people who are the experts in economics thought that we would not be seeing the amount of growth and the amount of jobs created that we are. So in June, when we talk about 4.8 million jobs added, that was actually the largest one-month job gain in history. And just in those past 2 months, 7.5 million jobs have been added. But let's narrow that down to the Black community specifically. Over 404,000 jobs were added for Black Americans. And what that also tells us is that the unemployment rate for Black Americans dropped from 16.8% down to 15.4%. Now, don't get me wrong. That's still too high, and there's more work to be done. But this is under the backdrop of COVID-19 impacting all of us in the economic realm, but more specifically the Black community disproportionately. And so even with COVID-19, we see that there's a silver lining, which is the economy is strong. And when we are able to open up the economy, which I hope that we're able to do safely and quickly, these indicators show that the Black community is on target to get those unemployment numbers back down. The trade deals and everything that were happening are very helpful to that, to bring back manufacturing jobs as well. So to sum it all up, the June job report shows that the economy is still strong and that we are on the right track.
Let me ask, Paris, how do we reconcile, though? Okay, so you have 4.8 million, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics, 4.8 million new jobs added in June. But then just last week, 2.4 million people nationwide filed for unemployment insurance. So, I mean, it's like you lose half of that gain. And so how do we reconcile that? I mean, it's yeah, okay, you may have like, sudden spurts, and it seemed like things were reopening. But now, like, the cases are surging back up, like to the point where we're actually beating records that were established before we went into lockdown. I mean, or at the time we went into lockdown or went into quarantine. So how do we account for that? How do we reconcile that? Like, okay, for every one step forward, then suddenly you take 1 or 2 steps back. You lose those. You already lost half of the 4.8 million that you said you gained in June.
Well, when you look at those unemployment figures, that also includes people who have been furloughed. We also know that the president signed legislation to extend PPP going into August, and so that's going to allow more. Is
the PPP working? However, I mean, is it really reaching the businesses that need it the most? Because I mean, based on news reports, it seems like the PPP is going to companies, to large multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, and even companies that are connected to the president and his associates and family that really don't need it. I mean, we even have PPP dollars going to a company owned by the wife of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. So, I mean, do we have any confidence that these Paycheck Protection Program dollars, we're seeing study after study showing like black businesses that needed it the most weren't really getting that much in PPP dollars?
In the second round of PPP funding, hundreds of millions were allocated for CFDIs and were specifically designated for minority communities. And if you just ask people like Robert F. Smith and Magic Johnson, who have joined together, and they are a part of a group that has been designated to be able to disperse the funds. I was going through the list of companies that were allocated to of PPP funding, and I saw organizations like the Urban League and Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and I've read the reports of black businesses that did receive PPP funding. And I think we have to be careful in how we talk about who deserves or who shouldn't get funding, because what it does is, it allows for people, no matter where you work, there are still employees that still need to have the relief to maintain a salary. And my hope is through the set-aside money for CFDIs and other minority investments, like what Magic Johnson and Robert F. Smith are doing, that more in our community can access this available funding. Because it's there. I saw many.
But you would agree that black businesses and these black organizations. I mean, I'm familiar with what Magic Johnson and others are doing. But I mean, like Magic Johnson, his effort, it's just like $100 million. But I mean, in the grander scheme of things, is that really going to do? I mean, it's not even going into like the $1 billion territory. I mean, based on like what Magic Johnson, for example, what his effort is doing. So it's like, I mean, can that, we're talking about businesses that are always under duress and always seem to be the ones saddled the most with implicit bias or systemic racism from banks that don't want to give these businesses the capital assets and loans that they need.
That's one of the reasons why you saw in the president's holistic approach in response to George Floyd's murder, he talked about access to capital for minority communities, because you're talking about things that are really important. That's why the Minority Business Development Agency awarded $10 million in grants to support minority-owned businesses.
But it's just $10 million, and so it's like
I think when we start,
I understand where you're coming from, and the president's talking about that. But what does that really do?
If I gave you just $10 million, what would you be able to do with it? I think that
but that's me alone. But what if you're talking about like thousands of black businesses? I mean, then $10 million is just pennies on the dollar.
Let's have a call to action. Let's have a call to action. We know that there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are still, billions of dollars that are still there, access to PPP. What I would love to see is more black-owned businesses actually get the right information, the truthful information about who applies and who doesn't, because that does mean independent contractors, sole proprietors. Let's break that down. Barbershop owners and barbers themselves, real estate agents. I would rather see us make this complaint after we see all these black businesses that have received funding, and they say there's no more funding, because what we know is that when it expired, the funding expired, they were still sitting on billions of dollars. That's because there was misinformation and people grew tired of actually trying to apply. What we know is that they have made significant gains in ensuring that the money is getting
what we're seeing based on studies, Paris, though, is that it's based on, black businesses either having a lack of relationships with the banks that are being relied on to disperse these funds, or the banks themselves cutting black businesses out of those professional personal networks. That's who seems to be getting the brunt of the PPP dollars, and that's a problem. That's something that seems to be ongoing.
Those claims were in the first round, but if you go to the facts of what happened with the second round of PPP funding, we know that there was money specifically set aside. So you can't argue that there's no money and there's no access when the federal government and the Congress respond to those cries of needing more help and does a specific set aside to make it easier using fintech and using things that the programs that Magic Johnson and Robert Smith have in place. And so there is money there that is specifically set aside to help address the issues that you're talking about, and yet we can't get all of those businesses that you're talking about to apply because there were still hundreds of millions of dollars sitting there. So that's just my point. I would rather have us apply, get it, and still have more need than to not apply, complain, and have the money sitting there.
Let me ask you also some good points, but I'm concerned about just these workforce numbers, because the black unemployment rate you're arguing is gone down, but it's still high, 15.4%, but really about over 25% of the black workforce is out of the labor force. So like when you start kind of adding other factors into there, which the BLS acknowledges but doesn't include in their official unemployment rate numbers, it's really high. And one other thing I'm worried about is you have 11% of the workforce that's currently out of work won't get their jobs back. I mean, how do we resolve that? How do we force businesses or go back to businesses and say, hey, listen, this thing happened out of everyone's control. This pandemic we're in,
Correct.
It's out. Well, I would probably argue that it was, but that's another conversation. It was within the administration's control. I mean, to not let this get out of control as bad as it has. But since we're here, it's like, hey guys, like, can you hire the people that you just laid off? Can you just keep it simple here and hire them back? I'm just really concerned about that. You have high numbers of people who lose their job to no fault of their own, and they can't get it back. That's a huge number of people there. And so that kind of like flies in the face of the claim that, hey, we're making a comeback with 4.8 million jobs when suddenly people can't get their jobs back.
That's the reason why the president has been advocating for PPP, because the things that you've been talking about that's what it was designed to do, was designed to people that were furloughed or people that were let go, to bring them back into the workforce and to keep them on the payroll. That was what it was designed to do. When they said that too much of the percentage was going to be for paying rent, they reduced that percentage so that more could be used for payroll expenses. So that's why PPP is important. Second point is, this is the reason why the president has been talking about finding safe ways in the phase system of opening up the economy. This is why the president is talking about opening up schools, because we know it disproportionately impacts, which Ivanka Trump tweeted yesterday, it disproportionately impacts single mothers, because you cannot talk about going back to work if you don't have a place for your children to go to school. So this is,
and that's something where, Paris, you and I actually agree on that piece, because I think that's a problem that like people don't acknowledge enough. You know, where do your kids? I got to get back to work, so where do my kids go during the day when I go back to work? But that said, then why is the administration like not clear on public safety? Okay, so I've seen a recent survey where 70% of black workers are saying, hey, you know what? I'm really uncomfortable. I'm scared to go back to work because I know I'm going to get sick if I go back to work. 70% of black workers, that's high, Paris. And so the president refuses to provide, and a lot of Republican governors refuse to provide clear, coherent public safety guide, just basic, like, hey, everyone wear your mask and keep social distance. It's as simple as that. But then you want people to go back to work. It's incongruent.
So the CDC has put out guidelines which are very clear. I think that everyone understands the administration, the Surgeon General Jerome Adams. If you follow him on social media, if you look at the PSAs have come out.
But that's the Surgeon General. What about the president? The buck stops with him. Like, hey, dude, the president just saying, hey, you know what? Everyone wear your mask. Let's just kind of get through this thing. Let's keep it simple here. I know I want to reopen the economy, but can you do these basic things? Stay off the beaches, stay out of crowds, and let's just get through this thing. Because people are afraid to get back to work. So it's like you want people to go back to work, but then you don't want to follow basic public health guidelines.
But people weren't afraid to go out and protest. People weren't afraid of that.
Yeah, but but one thing about the protests, though, Paris, and one, there's no scientific evidence that shows spikes or increases in cases, and two, they were wearing their mask. I gotta give it to them. I mean, the reopened folks weren't wearing masks, and they were getting sick. But one thing that the Black Lives Matter protests were doing, I gotta give it to them. They were wearing their mask. I had issues about that too. I even told my kids, hey, listen, y'all need to be careful about going out there, and if you do, wear masks and at least gloves or something, but wear your mask. So, I mean, that's why we're not seeing spikes in Black Lives Matter protest cases. I mean, we've been waiting for a few weeks now, and we have not seen it.
Well, first of all, we can agree to disagree. I think it's an overstatement to say that every person that was protesting out there for weeks on end had a mask. We can pull the tape and show plenty of examples.
Vast majority, I know there were some people that weren't wearing masks, but vast majority of folks were following those basic public health prophylaxis guidelines. And I even went down to across the street from the White House. I went down myself, and I saw majority of people, including myself, because I had to do it, because I had to cover it. Most people wearing masks. I mean, maybe you got like 3 or 4 people there not wearing masks, and but after a while, it's like everyone's wearing a mask. Most people are wearing a mask. Like 90% of people were out there wearing masks. So people aren't. Yeah, you're not going to get high levels of infections because people are like, hey, you know what? Let's just do this basic thing.
So I think that the president has made it clear for months now and been very clear on what the CDC guidelines are. All parts of the administration have been very clear about that. But ultimately, the local governments are in charge of reopening their states. And so, again, the local mayors and the local governors also have to make sure what their standard is going to be for each of their states to reopen and what the criterion is going to be for them.
Isn't that kind of a contradiction, though, Paris? Because they want to reopen the way they want to, but then the president is saying, hey, I'm going to threaten you with federal funding if you don't reopen your schools.
You can't have it both ways and say that opening the schools is important, and then the president says that if you don't open the schools, I'm talking about withholding funding. I think what my point I'm making is because of federalism, we know that the governors and the mayors control what happens on the local level. The president can set the tone. The CDC, the administration, which is the president, have made it very clear when it comes to how to slow the spread and social distancing and the phased approach to reopen the government. The issues that you are talking about as it relates to the economy go back to the fact that the economy remains shut down, that schools remain shut down. So when you have schools shut down and an economy shut down, then you will have people not able to work. But the point back to the original point about the unemployment numbers for the Black community, like I said at the beginning, yes, they are high. Yes, they are too high. But we know they can get back to where they were at historic lows before COVID-19 because the trend is that they're going down even in the face of COVID-19. And as long as we can open up the government, open up the economy, and get more manufacturing jobs here and find the new technologies that can come back here, the American people are resilient and smart, and the Black community will bounce back. And we've seen that the numbers continue to go down. We just have to do our part. If people are unsafe about going to work, they should be feel unsafe. They are also unsafe about going to get food, going to the bank, going to the grocery store. It's about personal responsibility, and those businesses should create the environment for them to feel safe, whether that's providing PPE equipment, whether that's providing testing, whether that's having different precautions on how you work. But you've seen grocery stores adapt. You've seen other ways and other things that people have done to adapt, and we will do that. But
all right. Yeah, we got to cut. Sorry, Paris, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we actually had to go to break, though. I do appreciate your time and come on. So hopefully we'll get you on again, and so we can kind of discuss this a little bit more. Paris Denard. Paris Denard is Senior Communications Advisor in Black Media Affairs for the Republican National Committee. Go to GOP.com for more information. Paris, thanks so much. Again, appreciate you. We have to go to break. I went a little bit over time, and we got to go into our EcoWord segment at the top of the 11 o'clock hour, where we're going to be discussing black farming. We have Alexandra Barlow of the Black Farmers Fund, who's going to be joining us next here on Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Weather and traffic to keep you informed for your drive home in the happy hour with Sincerely Sarita. Monday through Thursday, 4 till 7 p.m. Right here on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Are you looking for financing for your business? Well, the doors are open at New City Commercial Capital. For businesses in a position to grow, we are offering 100% financing for commercial real estate purchases. That's no down payment, no closing costs, absolutely no money out of pocket. Plus, the CARES Act will pay your mortgage payment for the first 6 months after closing. Do not procrastinate. This program ends August 1st. Give us a call today at 484-454-3592. New City Commercial Capital. Financing solutions for today's commercial customer.
Family Therapy Vignette Moments with Dr. Lucille Ijoy.
Things are slowly opening up. Some people are not satisfied with the schedule. Some don't want to hug you or shake your hand. I don't blame them in a way. So let's do a little elbow bumping. Here's a rap song poem about bumping your elbow as a signal for I'm glad to see you. We call this a therapy suggestion. Anything that can make you feel safe and healthy will help your youngsters too. Help them feel safe. Let's try it, okay? If you're thankful, bump your elbow just like this. Bump, bump. If you're thankful, bump your elbow just like this. Bump, bump. If you're thankful, you can say bump your elbow this away. If you're thankful, bump your elbow just like this. Bump, bump. What do you think about this elbow bumping for men, women, and youngsters?
Warning. If you're drowning in debt you can't afford, do not let the credit card companies trick you into thinking that you have to pay it all back, because you don't. What the credit card companies don't want you to know is that there's actually a way to get debt-free without paying off your entire debt or going bankrupt. If you have $10,000 or more in credit card debt, you have the right to let us settle that debt for a fraction of what you owe. For free information, call Credit Associates now. 1-800-965-5269. We'll even show you how much money you could save. If you can't afford to pay off all your debt, do not let the credit card companies trick you into thinking that you have to. Call Credit Associates for free information on how to get debt-free faster than you ever thought possible, without debt consolidation or bankruptcy. We depend on your success and offer a guarantee, so there's no risk to call. For free information, call now. 1-800-965-5269. That's 1-800-965-5269. 1-800-965-5269.
Now, with more clarity, this is Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Streaming live at wordradio.com. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check. We're in a special hour-long edition or broadcast or segment of EcoWord, ecoword.com, our environmental justice journalism project. Go to ecoword.com for more information and also content and insights as well. The topic of discussion during this 11 o'clock hour is black farming. And also we've been talking about that off and on here on Reality Check during our EcoWord broadcast. We've been talking about the growth of the evolution of urban farming and particularly black people in modern farming. And let's also be a little bit more specific there too. Black farming in the 21st century. And that's very significant, very important in a time like this. Joining us now is Alexandra Barlow. She's a seed keeper, she's a farmer, and she's also an organizer for the Black Farmers Fund, which is based in New York City. Go to blackfarmersfund.org for more information. Alexandra joins us by phone. Alexandra, how are you doing?
Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me okay?
All right, I can hear you very, very well. Yeah, perfectly.
Okay,
if we can't, we'll let you know.
Okay, good. Hi, everybody. Good morning.
All right, good morning. Good morning to you. So talk about what you do. Like, talk to us a little bit about the Black Farmers Fund. How do you organize for that? What's your role in it?
So, yeah, absolutely. So the Black Farmer Fund is a community investment fund that is launching right about this year, next year, officially, but it's already in motion. That is for and by Black farmers and food business owners across New York State. And so the intention of the fund is a couple of different things. One, it is to be fundraising and getting more money to Black farmers and food businesses across the state to build up our investment in the Black food system across the state, because we know that there is a particular way that many Black communities are really negatively impacted with the food system and with not having access to growing their own food or having their own food businesses. And so the intention is to really support the Black farmers and restaurant owners and cooks and distributors and all of those people who are already in the food system, trying to create these alternatives for Black people and support them more. And then the other aspect of it that is the part that I really work with is the part that is not only do we want to get this money and redistribute it, actually the idea is that the same people who are going to be receiving this money in the same community is also in control of deciding about who and how this money is going out. And so the role that I have as a facilitator of a group of 15 farmers and food business owners and food organizers, food justice organizers across the state that will be coming together to make the collective decisions about this money and who it's going to and which investments that we want to make as a community into ourselves and into each other. So it's both the part about getting the money out, but it's also about us doing collective decision-making and controlling the money ourselves and in community with each other. So the people who really know what it's like to receive or need that money are also the ones who are impacting how those decisions are being made.
Also, I should clarify, I should correct myself, too. It's not blackfarmersfund.org. It's blackfarmerfund.org.
Black Farmer Fund, yes.
Right, exactly. Blackfarmerfund.org for people who want to find out more about what the Black Farmer Fund, the Black Farmer Fund does. Can you describe for us, Alexandra, sort of the situation with Black farmers today? I think I remember reading a report from our partners at the Center for American Progress about Black farmers. I think they account now for about 2% of all farmers throughout the United States, and they're even lucky to still be persisting or existing in that space. But what's it like in New York State? First of all, like how many Black farmers are there? How do we define or classify farmers, particularly Black farmers? Because the farmers, they may not be in a rural area, they may be in something more urban or suburban. So that's a little bit more unique. And how difficult is it for them, or is it for you operating in a space like that and operating in a space where it's dominated by white farmers, and you got to deal with the systemic racism as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say a couple of different things. One, I mean, the Black Farmer Fund was established by a group of Black farmers, obviously across the state, who just were really tired of not having access to being able to build wealth for the community and having to deal with and jump through so many hoops and barriers to get financing for their projects, and so many incredible projects and visions that Black farmers want to bring to life are often held back by not having that access to wealth and finance, right? And so that was a lot of the reason why folks wanted to start the fund in the first place, because it's like, we actually just need to start our own thing, right? Like, if we're going to have to continue to go through so much with these white-led financial institutions, like, it's time to just do it ourselves. And so that is a lot of where that came from, and in particular being in, these white farming spaces, and in particular, like, now there's a movement around food justice and farming that is getting more and more, it's getting bigger, which is beautiful, but also more mainstream in certain ways that more white people are getting really interested in this thing that Black people have been doing for a very long time, right? And so the need to carve out specific space for Black people to continue to be in control of their own money and decisions in community with each other has a lot to do with it. And you're asking about how many Black farmers are there? What are the challenges? That's a great question, and that's one of the questions that the Black Farmer Fund is working, and also with other folks in the food system in New York State, to actually map out who are we, like who are all of us, like let's actually get all of our contact info, let's actually get all connected. And so that process of reaching out and trying to build our own database is actually happening right now. So I couldn't tell you a number, actually.
And, no, that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
That's that's part of the project, is like also identifying everybody who's out there, because there's a lot of people, and I think every day people are connecting with more and more Black farmers across the state. But yeah, there, it is definitely the situation with Black land ownership in the United States. Obviously, there's a lot that folks can read about this, and even just Googling it. But as we know, like Black landowners in the South and across the country, but obviously concentrated in the South in the 1900s, had millions and millions of acres of land under Black ownership. And now that number has decreased. I couldn't pull off the exact number off the top of my head, but dramatically, obviously, between people fleeing the South and moving to the North, Great Migration, and also just like the mass amount of violence by white local governments and white people that push people off of land, and all these other, like so many different ways through heirs property and different legal mechanisms, and just so many different ways that Black people have been pushed off of land. And so I think, with urban farming is something especially interesting and beautiful, because in many ways, like the Black people who are farming in the cities in the North now are the descendants of the people who were pushed off of their land in the South. And so it's actually this reclamation of that tradition, and of growing our own food, and of being in relationship with the land, that many Black people actually lost when they came north. And I will say, like, for my own family and my own story, that's very much exactly what happened. When my grandfather's family came to New York City, where I was born and raised from Virginia, that connection with the land, like they were on the land then, they were farming, and then when they came here, that connection was completely broken. And I am I kind of am the first person in my family to be like, I actually want to return to that. And that I see that across my generation in general. I'm 25 years old, as well as older than me. But I see that across a lot of folks now being like, oh, wait, we're trying to come back to this. We're trying to return and reclaim. Because that disconnection, I'm sorry, there's a motorcycle.
That's all right.
That disconnection from the land also has very much to do with, right, like the land being the place where people are able to grow food, the land being the place where people are able to make money for themselves, and not having those things, and also safety, right, and self-defense. And so not having those things is a huge part of, I think, just, talking about the economic exploitation that has happened to Black communities is rooted in that history, for sure.
I've always found this to be a fascinating conversation and topic, and but it's really hard to sometimes for our communities, for our people to reconcile that history, right, and that legacy. So, and I'm saying this as someone who grew up in Philadelphia, in the northern city, was the product of that migration. So my grandmother migrating, fleeing, basically, Jim Crow South, getting exhausted from that, tired of being constantly in fear of that, and looking for that potential opportunity over the horizon in the northern cities and in a city like Philadelphia. But and coming from that farming background, but it's a very complicated and very troubling history, right? With slavery, forced labor, sharecropping. So like and I think that also, whereas you do see this resurgence of interest in farming in the Black community, there's still a lot of Black folks out there who, when they think of farming, they visualize the forced labor, slavery aspect of it. And so how do we reconcile that illustration? How do we try to help people with that psychological trauma that's still in our DNA of going through, forced labor for taking care of the land at one point? It's not something we love taking care of the land, but then there was a point in our lives where we were forced to do it, and forced in a very violent and genocidal way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that has been, I've just been learning a lot about that. I will say, like, even in my own family, I've experienced that, definitely experienced that of, like, you know, speaking with family members, me and my mother about, like, okay, I want to do this work and I want to grow these things. And definitely the immediate reaction is, like, that's slavery. Like, that's the immediate reaction. Like, why would we ever go back to that? Why would we ever go back to that when we got away from it?
Right.
And I feel that, right? Like, and I know also that, like, me, somebody who grew up in the North, like, far away from that in many ways, I don't have the same kind of experience as my mother even, or my grandmother or my grandfather, due to that, where they're just like, I'm trying to get out of that. But I do, and so I want to honor that experience, right? And I don't want to say, like, I don't want to, like, move on from it, because that's actually so important. And I think, obviously, that is where we come from, and that is what is going to define our relationship with land no matter what. And so, yeah, how do we kind of deal with that psychological trauma? I mean, I think first of all is naming it, right? Honoring it, acknowledging it. And the other thing is actually knowing history and being a student of history, right? We know that our ancestors were forced onto the land and were forced to grow food and grow other things that weren't food as well, like cotton and different products. And also, like, all the time when Black people could, they were also growing food for themselves on the plantation, right? Like, they were also trying, like, all these different ways to be in relationship with the land that weren't about forced labor. And also, we know and are learning more now that one of the main things that slave traders were looking for in enslaved people, in African people, was agricultural knowledge and expertise, right? And so they didn't just, like, bring any random Black people. They were like, no, we want to bring the people who know how to grow food and who know how to grow stuff, because that's, you know, that was what they were trying to exploit. And so I think also recognizing that, which is, like, the strength and the power and the beauty that comes with being in relationship with the land and growing food, is also in our ancestry. And actually, way before being enslaved, that was in our ancestry. And so, yes, like, we have the more recent memories of the pain and of the violence that has meant Black people being on land. And also, we know that there's something so much more than that. And I think that also, because the land has been a site of so much violence for Black people, it is also the site where we're going to be able to heal from a lot of that violence. And I know that for myself and for so many other Black people that I, you know, have met and am in community with who work with the land, like, that is 100% part of it, right? Like, yes, it is about growing food for community and literally supplying food that isn't there, and growing seeds, and I can talk more about the seeds and all of that as well, but it is 100% a place of, oh, yes, actually precisely because so much violence happened here, that this is a place where we're going to be able to reckon with that violence.
Right. How is that process? We've got you for a few more minutes. What is that process like, right? You know, kind of illustrate that a little bit for us. I feel like, Alexandra, this has been a very very just fascinating and sentimental conversation too. So I really hope that the folks who brought you on, you know, kind of scheduled you in the first place, we bring you back on real soon for a second part of this discussion. But what is that process like? You know, because you're a seed keeper, right? You're a seed planter. So how does that take place?
The seed work. Yeah, so I will say I have only been working with seeds, like, in a dedicated way for a couple of years. I am definitely learning. I definitely am, like, a forever student, and it's important to me to say, like, I'm not an expert, but I do put a lot of intention and care and time into that work. So it is important to me. The seed work. The seed work is, I mean, what it looks like is. What it has looked like, right, for me a lot is sharing of seeds. A big part of it has been building seed libraries and collections of seeds where people actually have community access and community ownership over seeds, right? One of the biggest issues that has happened to Black people around the world, definitely in Africa, definitely in the Caribbean as well, is the privatization of seeds and the stealing of seeds from indigenous Black communities and all indigenous communities around the world. That is actually really fundamental to privatization in our society in general and in the food system. So taking away seeds from people that were essential to their culture and heritage, that were passed down for generations, that were adapted to their environments and climates so that they could grow in the best way. When corporations came in and took all of that over, that was a huge break in Black people's ability to continue to grow food and have food sovereignty, and also in their cultural strength and connection. And so a lot of it looks like actually taking seeds back into a collective. Taking seeds back into a collective place away from being in isolation, or you have to buy seeds. You have to buy seeds. Farmers have to spend money on seeds. And so what we're trying to do instead is put seeds into the commons, right, and say we're actually trying to share these things. We don't believe in buying or selling seeds. We believe in sharing these things because they are the very means of food production, and they also are literally, seeds only exist in our hands today because our ancestors passed them down for hundreds of years. That is the only reason why we eat food. That is the only reason why we grow food today, is because of that. That's where food comes from, is from seeds. And so the seed work, we have been building seed libraries, and I would say within that, I definitely focus on, yes, I both am on the level of everybody needs more access to seeds, and the cutting off of most people from seeds is something that has negatively affected everybody, and also in particular Black communities. So I focus especially on African and Black diasporic seeds, the ones that are important to our cultures and our families, making sure that we are continuing to build the supply of those seeds that are grown by our people, not by, these private and these big corporations, but that are actually grown by our people, because that way we know how to use them. We know how to take care of them. We know how to pass them on to each other. And so it's both about sharing the seeds with each other, but it's also about sharing the stories and the knowledge and the history that comes with those seeds. And both of those things make our communities around Black, farming and Black people on land so much stronger.
We've been talking with. I'm sorry, we had to cut you off, Alexandra. Alexandra Barlow is an organizer with the Black Farmer Fund. Go to blackfarmerfund.org for more information. She is herself a Black farmer, also a seed planter and farmer. She for more, once again, go to blackfarmerfund.org for more information. She's been joining us here on EcoWord. Alexandra, we have to let you go, but really appreciate your time and being with us today and talking with us as well. I really appreciate this. We're going to have you back on real soon, because I think we need to continue. We need to expand on the discussion. I really want to talk too about how we scale up those efforts, so how we kind of take them to a whole new level, because I've been having conversations with multiple people in multiple places, trying to figure that out, food sovereignty as a lot of folks are calling it now, as opposed to food security. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Okay, let's take a quick break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll be talking with EcoWord.com's project manager, Janine Kayembe. Janine Kayembe, also a Black farmer. We're going to continue this discussion about Black farming. Phone lines are open too while we talk with Janine. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it's 866-361-0900. As we continue this discussion, very needed and significant, essential discussion about Black farming here on EcoWord, which is now on Reality Check at this moment. 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the Source lineup on Word Radio. Mondays, get ready for the rapping professor, Dr. Aaron Smith. On Tuesdays, it's Andrea Lawful Sanders. Then on Wednesdays, it's the Black Women's Leadership Council. On Thursdays, it's a second helping of Andrea Lawful Sanders. And on Fridays, it's Tiffany Bacon. Don't miss the Source. Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. and Fridays, 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. Exclusively on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live on wordradio.com and on the Word Radio app. Dietz & Watson has been making premium meats and artisan cheeses for over 80 years. And when it comes to stacking sandwiches and party platters, they've got something for everyone in the family, like maple honey turkey breast, American cheese, buffalo chicken, and more. So get to your local deli and taste 4 generations of family recipes. With Dietz & Watson on the table, you'll have everyone coming back for seconds and thirds. Dietz & Watson, it's a family thing since 1939. WordRadio.com.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
All right, waiting on Janine Kayembe, who is project manager for EcoWord, EcoWord.com for more information. Also, for the past decade, she's been co-director of an arts and agriculture hub in North Philly, and she's been involved in incubating dozens of community art programs around the country. She's currently an autonomous community designer as well at holistic.art. And she focuses quite a bit on Black farming and actually brought us Alexandra Barlow, among others, to talk with us about this subject. Janine, how are you doing? Can you hear us?
Yep, I'm here. I'm good. How are you doing today, Charles?
All right, excellent, excellent. I appreciate this. So, and phone lines are open too in case you have questions, you want to join in on this discussion, or maybe share your experiences with Black farming or with urban farming. That's a big deal. That's a growing movement in a place like Philadelphia and in a number of other places. So I know people are having their own experiences, and we'd like for you to share that with us and why that's important to you. 215-634-8065 and 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check on EcoWord. We're doing a special EcoWord segment on farming while Black. So Janine, why do you think farming, especially in a time like this, is so significant? It's so important. Why we need to revisit it the way we're revisiting it now?
So I think Alexandra had a great lead up and, talked about this a little bit. As, just where she left off at as far as the privatization of seeds, there's this beautiful story that Monsanto, which is a large GMO seed company, after the Haitian earthquake that happened a few years back, they sent a big pile of seeds, and the Haitians burnt those seeds on fire.
Wow.
And that's because those seeds are GMO. So the fact that, we really understand this way of living and this way of life to be able to produce and cultivate our means without things like money, capital resources, all of these kind of external worldly things, I think is very important for us as Black people to reclaim that. And I really wanted to focus this specific segment on Black farming because Leah Pennyman and Soulfire Farm up in New York State, they wrote a great book, Farming While Black, and it really talks about the reclamation of the land. It talks about contemporary farming for Black people in cities, in rural areas, and all these different places. And it's really, first and foremost, to heal that trauma. I think it's very important for, myself. I was a co-director of an urban farm in North Philadelphia for a decade. And, that was bringing young folks from the Fair Hill housing project from PHA onto this gigantic 3-acre lot where we were growing things like collard greens and onions and garlic and bell peppers, and you had your everyday North Philly bowl, as they would say, coming onto the land, watering plants, taking part in this knowledge, and it was healing for myself just to see that interaction with young Black people, specifically young Black men, young Black women, young Black queer people as well, and really having this reclamation of self. And like thinking about growth in a different way. Right. I know a lot of young people, they in the beginning they planted the seed and they're like, okay, where's the tomato?
Right. Hey, and let me, with seeds too, Janine, because when you were talking about that, that's a fascinating story about how like Haitians, in the wake of a crisis, in the wake of like facing mass starvation, they burned seeds that were donated to them from a multi-billion-dollar agrotech conglomerate, Monsanto. And so, you mentioned GMO. Explain that, because there might be a lot of people in the audience, probably the vast majority of folks who don't understand. They hear that sometimes. They hear GMO and they don't understand what that means. But why is that important? Like, why don't we want seeds with GMO? What does GMO stand for?
So genetically modified organisms, I mean, it's just, to me, it's right there in the name. Basically what's happening is, like a lot of our food, McDonald's and KFC and things, fast food, they don't have places where there's just like large places where you cook the food and you make the food. They have scientists that are in laboratories that are creating things like smoked flavor, natural flavors, chicken flavor, and with seeds, what's happening is that they have scientists who are in these laboratories that are taking seeds and making them one-time crops. Because what's supposed to happen is when you plant a seed, the plant bears you fruit, and from that fruit you get more seeds. So with companies like Monsanto, they're genetically modifying the seeds to just give you one crop, and so that things are seedless, just like seedless watermelon, seedless grapes, things like that. And it's so that you can't just continue to reproduce this food over and over again for free. If the Haitians would have planted those seeds, not only would it, like if they were growing any just like local crops that had nothing to do with Monsanto seeds, those seeds would not only taint the local crops, but they would also only bear fruit one time, and then the Haitians would be technically, enslaved to the process of growing those seeds, buying them, planting them again, growing them, buying them. So you have this like kind of middleman that is in between you and the planting. My partner has worked in East Africa a lot with farmers out there as well, and this is something that's happening, is that a lot of people, because they make the seeds cheaper or more accessible, or, Monsanto has these like these crews that come out from China and all these places that are giving seeds to, around the continent, and it's making it less sustainable, because the sustainable thing is that your food reproduces on its own, but now you have to pay for each season, each crop, and it can be up to the thousands and millions depending on how large your production site is.
Yeah,
that's taking us away from organic.
Yeah, no, that's tragic. They get you hooked. So they're hoping that these populations get hooked, and then suddenly they're on the hook. They're in.
It's the same formula as drug abuse, as entertainment, all of these different things that have the potential to, have a one-time kind of stimulation that then you have to continue to pay for and pay for and pay for.
Right. Janine, we're going to end it. Folks are just now listening in. We're talking to the project manager for EcoWord, ecoword.com, our environmental justice journalism project, and where we focus on topics like farming or like farming while black. That is the focus, the theme of our conversation today, farming while black, our EcoWord segment here on Reality Check. Janine, we have a couple of callers, actually. Let me go to Daryl out of Lansdale, who's calling in for a Reality Check in our conversation on farming while black. Daryl?
Hi, how you doing? Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Thank you.
I advertise, thank you, sir. I advertise in WRD. We own a growing company that grows in 1 square feet close to about 150 green peppers. We build automated systems. I invented it, and I'm the owner of the company. My question to you is, with the new technologies, do you see, I've actually been a part of the Black Farmers Association and prayed with them and attended their meetings, and they know me pretty well. But as far as new technology, I don't see that much new technology when it comes to African Americans. Are you looking into that, or how does that fit into your game plan? Because traditional gardening may not get the yields because the grounds are polluted and the water's polluted. So can you speak to that, please?
So I think
good question. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah, thank you, Daryl. I appreciate that. Actually, to my knowledge, Cheney University has the largest aquaponics system on the eastern seaboard. Aquaponics is when you take fish like tilapia, which people are scared of, and they shouldn't be because if it's grown, organically, and you are able to, really know where your fish comes from, it's fine. And they're growing basil and tilapia at the same time. And so, honestly, we actually created the technology for agriculture. The Egyptians are the first that we know of to create irrigation systems and, the reuse and pumps and things like that, especially George Washington Carver making so much technology. So we definitely do use a lot of technology in farming. As far as it goes, this goes back to an access and resource conversation. For myself as a farmer in the city, there's a misconception that all land in the city is polluted. There are some places that, if you get your soil tested, it is fine. Right there in the heart of North Philadelphia, right next up against the SEPTA train line, it took us a few years to build our soil, but we only had 13 parts per million lead in our soil, and the average yard has about 150, and I think Flint had 350 parts per million lead in the water. So right there, heart of North Central Philadelphia, we were, the way we were able to mitigate our soil, which is another technology, but that's organic. We were able to plant hundreds of sunflowers, and sunflowers extract the lead from the soil and make your soil growable, as well as adding other nutrients and doing natural things like composting. So, and that was we only were able to do that because, a machine that would till the land and adding nutrients and all of that is way more expensive than, a 10-pound bag.
And and Janine, that raises a nut because Daryl was, and Daryl, we got to let you guys, I want to make, because we got a few other callers as well, and I want to make sure, but that's a very important question. And Daryl would invite you to, reach out to us, C. Ellison at wordradio.com, reach out to us and talk about, because I feel like that's that warrants a deeper conversation, right, Janine, as far as pollution too. Yeah. Because, you have black folks, black communities were disproportionately in polluted spaces, particularly in land soil polluted spaces. And that's all over the United States. And that's particularly a relevant discussion in Philadelphia, too, where there's so much environmental toxic stress on the air and on the land and on the water. So I'd like to continue that conversation, Daryl. And so we'll circle back on that a little bit later on. Let me go to Earl.
Aquaponics and hydroponics, and if we had the money, I'm sure we would use it more.
Exactly, and speaking of Cheney, that's you're absolutely correct, Janine. Cheney is supposed to be at the forefront of those kinds of efforts and activities, but then Cheney's dealing with issues, right? As an institution, the oldest HBCU, but then it's well, what's its future? What's its fate? How are we going to save Cheney so it can continue to do things and Cheney? And there's a number of HBCUs in the 1890 land-grant universities that are engaged in this kind of activity. And a lot of people don't realize that how HBCUs are actually kind of at the forefront of some of this conversation and activity. But anyway, before I belabor that point, let me go to Earl out of Atlantic City, New Jersey, who's calling in for a reality check. Earl?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for this conversation today. This is right on time with some of the issues that I've been working on. I've organized the black business community in Philadelphia, and so we can have a greater impact on the local, corporate community and on the national corporate community. And one of the things that I've noticed, Charles, I'm sure you've noticed it too, is that, while corporate America is doing this apology tour right now, where they're recognizing black people, it seems like for the first time, and using their commercial dollars to advertise and message the fact that they're going to make these donations to Black Lives Matter and the Urban League and the NAACP, most of which we will never see on a grassroots level, these $10 million donations. You know what I'm saying? So what I've been looking at, Charles, is how can we increase the amount of supplier diversity money from these corporations? So instead of giving $10 million to the NAACP, which is one of my favorite organizations, by the way, why don't we look at how we can, purchase from black farmers to increase our spend with them. So companies like McDonald's, who've also, offered to donate to the NAACP, why can't they offer sustainable contracts to black farmers for potatoes and tomatoes and lettuce and all the things that they use, Coca-Cola, sugar, all the things they use on a daily basis, flour for the rolls they make. Okay, let's have that conversation moving forward as you continue to explore this, opportunity with black farmers to enlarge the conversation to make sure that we're being included in those supplier contracts, which are more sustainable than a one-off donation to the NAACP.
Yeah, this is a very good point. Because that gets to that quality of life question. Go ahead, Janine.
Yeah, no, I was saying that's a great point. And since you're right there in Philadelphia, if you're driving on 76 towards West, you'll see a gigantic building that says FMC. That is the Farming Machinery Corporation. And basically, they created the first implements, in like maybe the early 1900s of for pesticides, right? And what happens is you gotta follow the breadcrumbs, right? Just like all of these, pharmaceutical companies will lead you to the hip hop industry. Well, for farming, these pesticide, so we're talking about relationships. These pesticide and farming machinery companies have relationships with specific farmers. And those are the farmers who are growing on this mass scale. We're talking about monocropping, millions of acres of potatoes, of lettuce, of all of these things. And the black farmers, at least I know some folks that have large farms, you have to use some pesticides and things like that. But the real wave is really trying to get to as close to organic as possible. Yeah. And we don't have the money, again, to use a lot of this machinery and a lot of these pesticides and these implements to even contend with some of the white farmers that are supplying things like McDonald's and Coca-Cola and all of this stuff, And then not to mention, so much stuff is coming from China, so it's not even about the white farmer. Most of the time your garlic is coming from China. It's not coming from the South. It's not coming from California. So, you have a lot of these little breadcrumbs that all lead up to black farmers and black people being left out of this conversation to supply the world, even though we've been supplying the world, this world, the United States, we've been supplying it since we got here.
That's true. Janine, I'm gonna take a real quick break, Janine. So hold on, because I gotta take a break, and then Sister D out of West Philly, Mayo out of Center City. Hold on just 1 second, and we got a couple of folks on Facebook Live. They've got comments and questions as well. So stay right there, Janine. We're gonna take a break here during our EcoWord Farming While Black special broadcast here on Reality Check Thursday edition. And let's take a break, and phone lines are open if you have questions or you want to also make a point. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Listen to Laborers Live.
We created the weekend. We created the 40-hour work week. We just want enough to feed our family, be able to send our children to college, and let our next generation do better than we did.
To people that might have forgot how important unionism is in a country like the United States. People now infringing on our 8-hour work day, trying to work people more than 8 hours without overtime, trying to work people without benefits. In the long run, everybody's getting a fat paycheck except the worker. So this is really a wake-up call for America.
The struggle is continuous. Tune in to Laborers Live every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. Sponsored by LESIT, the Laborers Employers Cooperation Education Trust of the Laborers District Council of Philadelphia and vicinity.
Local 332, Sam Staten Jr. Business Manager. Local 57, Esteban Vera Business Manager. Local 135, Dan Woodall Jr. Business Manager. Local 413, James Harper Jr. Business Manager. The Laborers District Council, Ryan Boyer Business Manager, and Tony Staten, Executive Director of LESIT.
Solutions on Word. Hosted by Dwayne Royster and Amadi Braxton. Solutions on Word. Exploring solutions to national, state, and local issues through the lens of race and gender. Solutions on Word. Fridays 5 p.m. till 7 p.m. Exclusively on Word Radio. 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Solutions is sponsored by Power Interfaith Movement, working towards life, liberty, and democracy for all.
Support independent black media and join the Forward movement now at 215-425-7875 or visit wordradio.com. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
Okay, we're continuing our discussion, Farming While Black, here on our special EcoWord special broadcast on Reality Check's Thursday edition. We have Janine Kayembe. She is project manager for EcoWord, our environmental justice journalism initiative project. Go to ecoword.com for more information and content and information and analysis as well. Ecoword.com. We've been operating for a couple of years now. And sparking a lot of awareness, Janine, around environmental justice, environmental racism, all these issues at the intersection of race, racism, class, and other issues as well. So it's a very essential conversation. It is the conversation of our Black times. Let me go to Janine, Sister D out of West Philly, who's calling in for a discussion here on Farming While Black. Sister D?
Peace and blessings to you both and
Peace.
to the Word family. I happen to be a senior, and I am going to say this is one of the most important things that we could speak of, and we need to speak about it as often as possible.
We do.
When I was a child, on the TV commercials, Monsanto was a chemical company. They made linoleum and things of that nature. That's what they advertised. And more than that, we really need to understand that these people are evil. And the reason I use the word evil is because they are trying to change nature the way that the Most High Creator set it up. And this is about life and death. Because the one who controls the food, especially if they're doing it all around the world, they're controlling life and people's opportunity to live in a healthy way. We trust different companies, and I would give you the one example of Arnold's bread. That would be one that you would think would be trustworthy, but on one particular bread, and I think it's the buttermilk, you look on the side of that package and look at the fine print. It will tell you there that it's being made from genetically modified food, or the flour or the grains that are used are not natural and normal. You better even look on the package of what you might consider to be one of your favorite cookies. Oreo. This stuff is dangerous, and what they want to do is get everyone, like you said, hooked around the world like they tried to do in Haiti. And then when they plant those seeds, it messes up the food, the soil. The people have to come back to them continually.
That's true. Sister D, I'm sorry, I hate to cut you short. Sister D, if you can hear us, I hate to cut you short, too, because we got a lot of callers, people calling in, but you made some very fine points. Janine, hold on 1 second, because I want you to respond to that. Let me take real quick, Janine, before you answer. Mayo out of Center City, who's calling in for our discussion on Farming While Black. Ms. Mayo?
Yes, thank you. I want to remind people that are in apartments that you still can grow food right in your apartment. Right now I'm growing tomatoes. I'm growing herbs like sage and cilantro and parsley. I'm doing that right from just simple pots. I'm growing this stuff. I even have a device, but I don't have enough room, but you can even grow watermelons. I don't know if you know that. I'm glad you mentioned East Africa. I would love to see a conference where blacks here who are farmers and Africans who till the land, that they would have a conference and exchange ideas because, I once lived in Africa. I know Monsanto, that company is in Africa. And I do believe that in the months or years to come, food is going to be used as a weapon, not just in Africa, but here in America as well. So I would love to see a conference between African farmers and blacks here in America who are farmers.
That's
Yeah.
right. And you know what? And thank you for that point too, Ms. Mill. Real quick, Janine. That's why I keep telling people we need to, especially in a time like this in the 21st century, we need to start thinking diasporically. We need to start thinking or acting diasporically at least. I mean, I understand we have differences as like African American, as Caribbean, as African, but nearly a quarter of the total black population in the U.S. is black diaspora or black migrants. Two, there's just all sorts of resources and technical knowledge and intellectual capital that we as African Americans could actually leverage and benefit from if we partner up and team up with our brothers and sisters on the African continent, in the Caribbean, in Europe, and elsewhere, like teaming up and getting that kind of, through information and collective knowledge and conversation and coordination. There's a lot of power in that. But anyway, Janine, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also include our indigenous brothers and sisters as well because, collectively we have a lot of knowledge from the land. Going back to what Ms. D said, I can go right back to what was said about growing in your apartment. Yes, there are amazing practical ways right now that you can grow, small herbs, tomatoes, really not too labor-intensive herbs and veggies in your home right now, whether it be a small garden box that you can buy or have built, or little pots as well. You can reuse mason jars. There's so many different ways to kind of set up your home growing garden. As far as Monsanto goes, as, being this gigantic chemical company, yes, they kind of have capitalized on this seed market, and that's what farmers everywhere are trying to combat. But something that I just realized is how we had these both great elders call in. Black elders in our community, indigenous elders in our community hold so much knowledge. And, for folks like myself that are young and growers and things like that, it's really important to connect back to our elders because these companies can take the actual implements like seeds and machines. But one thing that I've noticed is that they cannot take spirit. There's no way that they can take the information that has been passed down to us from our elders to identify plants, to look at seeds, to, be able to connect with the earth in this way. And, I think that's really important. And one of the first steps in being a grower in the Black community is really honoring our elders and our ancestors who held the land before us. And I think as we continue, my grandmother I'm half Congolese, and my grandmother was a termite farmer, and that's the source of protein that we have, in our village. And she passed, and look at her granddaughter coming back generations later and really understanding that it's time to come back to the earth. Even as we speak right now, I'm homesteading. I just built my own home. I'm going to be building my own farm on this 5 acres that I just bought. And we have other friends and family who are my age, 30, 40, in their early 20s, who are reclaiming Black land and really living up that spirit. It can't be broken within us.
No, it can't. It can't. Let me go to Mamie out of University City, who's waiting patiently for a conversation on how we farm while we're Black. Ms. Mamie?
Good morning, Brother Charles and Sister Janine. I am so happy to hear this conversation. I have 3 trees in my backyard that I had planted back in 2017. And because there's so much foliage here in the area, they are suffering for some sunlight. And I need to contact a good landscaper. Do you have any information? Do you have a phone number I can call and try to get someone to come help me with my trees?
Yeah, Janine, do you have any ideas with respect to that?
I can't think of any Black landscapers. I know there is. I just don't have his information off the top of my head. But if you're able to either call back into the station or email us. I can try and get you that that information. But I really think that, you know, my thing is if you have any young men or young women that are willing and able to help you out in your garden with those trees that can get up on the ladder, that's really, you know, that's a connection for them to the land and learning how to tend to things.
And you know what I would do here too, Janine? I think, and Ms. May, you raise a good question here, and there's an opportunity I'm seeing, and I think we need to flesh this out more in this program and also internally at Word. Ms. Mamie, call WURD Sales. That's a good first step. 215-425-7875. Maybe they might know of black landscaping businesses that have either expressed interest in advertising on WURD or are part of like our Black Business Directory. So I think that's the first step, which this is kind of like, you know, Janine, for you and I to have this conversation, because now it's starting to make me think of like, yeah, you know, I'm sure there's got to be black landscapers or black agricultural relevant businesses in Philadelphia, and we need to make them like a lot more a part of that EcoWord initiative and what we're doing with EcoWord. Let me do this, Janine. I want to take, because he's been waiting very patiently, Joe out of Mount Airy is calling in for a conversation on farming while black. Joe, how are you doing?
Great. How are you today?
All right, good. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm Joe, and I'm like a lifelong agriculturalist. I went to Seoul High School, and I went to farm school up in Roxborough, and went to Tuskegee and Penn State, and I've been working in the industry for like over 30 years. I love the business, and I'm working with a company called Torpedo Pot, and I believe that this can be a savior or make a dent in urban agriculture.
The owner just called. I think that was Daryl out of Lansdale is the owner of Torpedo Pot, and I believe they advertise here on WURD. Exactly,
yes,
very familiar with them.
Yes, they do. We're working. Yes. I work with Daryl. So all you have to do is hook this pot up to to a faucet, add soil, add seed, and for plants, and you have a garden. It's very easy. It's very simple to do. So what we could do going forward as a community is build up this network. You talk about the black farmers. What we need to do is build this distribution channels like farmers market in our community, so we can come and have a way and we can grow this organic produce in the community. The thing about organic, it doesn't have a long shelf life. So you can't really haul it. It's not good to haul from Mexico to say Philadelphia. So what you want to do is have it local. So you really want to strengthen the local agriculture and strengthen the local agricultural marketing system. So it's nothing stopping anyone from creating a little market for the growers to come and bring the crops to. That's what needs to happen. Like the other caller said, maybe getting a big contract. Yeah, these acres, these farms are like thousands of acres, and they have to be graded, and everything has to be a certain way for them to be part of a commercial production. You know, so that's a whole nother.
I think you raised, you know, and Janine, and I know we ran on time, unfortunately. I get a feeling that this could have been a 2-hour discussion, right? Because we got a lot of interest in food info. We got several comments on Facebook Live too, so people are really excited about this discussion. I get a feeling like we'll talk about this internally, but maybe we need to bring it back next week and expand it, because there's a lot of interest there, and I think people really are hungry, pun intended, for solutions and figuring out ways to kind of scale this up. And that's making me, like right now as we speak, generate ideas, and I'm sure it's doing the same to you. But we have to go. We've been talking with Janine Kayembe, who is project manager for EcoWord, our EcoWord journal, environmental justice journalism project. Go to ecoword.com for more information. We're probably going to have a little bit more information in the future about this conversation and other topics. And she's pulled together this Farming While Black discussion, introduced us to Alexandra Barlow. Thank you for that, Janine. And thank you, Alexandra, too, and the Black Farmer Fund. See who else we can get here to talk about this very important, crucial topic. Janine, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I hate the fact that we had to go to break, but that's okay. We'll get you back next week.
Yeah, no worries. I just want everyone to check online and listen to that excerpt of Farming While Black. If you don't have the book yet, thank you, Charles, for having me on, and let's continue to talk about this more.
Yeah, we will definitely do that. I promise you. All right, let's take a break. It's very unfortunate. I really appreciate folks on Facebook Live. We'll get to you a little bit shortly after we go through these next couple of segments. We'll address some of your comments a little bit later on in the program. But we have to take a break, and when we come back at the top of the noon hour, another essential discussion: education. How our children are being educated. We're bringing on Steve Suitz, who's the author of Overturning Brown, the Segregationist Legacy of the Modern School Choice Movement. So Steve Suitz is joining, I believe I pronounced his name correctly, is joining us next to talk about Black K-12 education and a lot of challenges and problems and promise there. So let's take a break, and we'll be right back here on, we'll be coming back to Reality Check, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. We'll be right back.
So you just finished binge watching that entire TV series? Now it's time to binge listen at wordradio.com. Check out our archives of WURD on demand and listen to some of the most memorable moments from your favorite hosts. Word Radio on demand. Check it out right now at wordradio.com/podcasts.
Tune in Saturdays from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. to hear Empire Capital and Consulting founder Mark Palmer's show titled Black Money, Black Power. This show centers around black money and how black power is derived from money. Tune in every Saturday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Black Money, Black Power, hosted by Mark Palmer.
Need a new mattress? Stop by to see Julian, the Mattress Man, located at 7421 Stenton Avenue. You deal directly with the owner, Julian, to ensure the best prices on name brand mattresses like Sealy Posturepedic. Call 215-424-5550. That's 215-424-5550.
This is Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Independent Black Media. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check. It is now the top of the noon hour here on the home of Black Talk Media, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. Thank you so much again for everyone listening and folks who called in. Really appreciate that massive response to our segment on Farming While Black. So we will continue that conversation. I promise you. I get a feeling we need to bring that back next week and start kind of getting into more of a planning session around that, because there's a lot of good ideas that started to come out of that discussion. So we'll definitely get back to that next week. Joining us now is Steve Suitz. Steve Suitz, the author of a book entitled Overturning Brown, the Segregationist Legacy of the Modern School Choice Movement, put out by New South Books. Go to newsouthbooks.com for more information on that, or to find out how you can get a copy of Overturning Brown, rather controversial title. He's talking about the modern school choice movement. We've talked about that before here on Reality Check. A lot of interesting, fascinating, but troubling politics and ideology in that conversation as well. So Steve Suitz here to kind of break that down for us and find out what we do, especially what is the future of education, particularly K-12 education in a pandemic era like this. Steve, how are you doing? Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you.
All right, excellent, excellent. What is Overturning Brown? What did you mean by that? Kind of give us like a real quick sort of top line summary of your book.
What's been happening is that we've been restricting the powers of public schools in order to provide equitable education to all students, while at the same time across the country in now 26 states we've been building the scaffolding of a private school system supported by public funds, a school system that is primarily serving white students in a virtually segregated environment with no restrictions as to how these private schools may choose their students or reject students. And this is in effect a process by which we are overturning the promise of Brown versus the Board of Education, which said that all students would get a fair, equitable, and resourceful education.
So, yeah, you basically you're framing that's the what's called the modern school choice movement or, charter schools, these nonprofit schools that are publicly funded. What are some trends right now as you see them kind of unfolding that are troubling you, some of the demographic trends? I mean, is it indeed the case? I mean, because you do see a lot of, for example, Black and brown students who are increasingly becoming, the most prominent population or racial demographic in public schools, but you're seeing a lot of them joining or having their parents enroll them in charter schools or in, publicly funded nonprofit schools as well.
Well, I think there are the exceptions, but if you look across the country, and even in Pennsylvania, the majority of students in the private schools are white students, and most of those white students are attending schools in which African Americans and Hispanics and Native Americans are less than 10% of the student population. And that is we go back to the segregationist origins of the private school, of public support for private schools, and that was something that happened in my region, the South. And many of the characteristics of these programs today that are putting public money into private schools have the same characteristics as programs that were started by the Southern segregationists to defeat Brown versus the board.
What about, so how do we make that distinction, however? So you're absolutely right as far as private schools. I was wondering, I'm curious about those public, what are called public charter schools, right? So I know that the proportion of white students in public charter schools has actually fell by 10 percentage points over the past 20 years. And so now you have about a higher proportion of Black students in public charter schools. I think it's about 26% of Black students or students in public charters are Black, and 33% of public charter school students are Hispanic or Latino. So what do we do about those? Because that also is, you're using these public monies to fund these nonprofit schools that are, in some cases, in certain places, are popular with Black parents and brown parents.
Well, I think first of all, the charter school movement is growing, and I think we have to. I'll comment on it, but I do want to make the point that there is a far larger number of kids going to private schools with public support than there are kids going into charter schools today across the country. And that's one of the reasons I focused on the private school choice movement. As to public choice, as to the charters, the charters began as a way in which to they began like magnet schools once did, which is to sort of see if you take something out of the regular school system, is there a way in which to innovate for education that is more successful? That, unfortunately, that role for charter schools has been supplanted by an effort in which they have begun to align themselves with private schools in order to promote this holistic notion, as they see it, of choice. You could choose public schools or you can choose private schools. The alliance of the private school movement with public support and the charter school movement means that original purpose of a charter school, which is to find ways in which to effectively educate all students, has been undercut across the country by the fact that they're now it's now a movement in order to create a school system that is not accountable to the public.
Yeah, what do you find troubling? I mean, and that trend has escalated, particularly with the entrance of Betsy DeVos, right, as the Secretary of Education. She stayed in there. She's pretty much like the longest serving, I believe, in terms of years, the longest serving Trump administration cabinet official. Talk a bit about her, how she factors into this big school choice movement that's been evolving, but has grown over the years. How that's worsened the public school environment.
Sure. Yeah, Secretary DeVos has spent most of her public life trying to undo the public school system, and she believes that the best education for a student is a private school, a private religious school. Well, the problem with that is very much that I'm all for religion in lives, but I'm not for religious institutions that are schools that get to select students on the basis of their religion, because that essentially today means you're selecting often on the basis of race. And she has spent her entire term in the Trump administration trying to find ways in which to increase funding for unaccountable schools and to decrease funding for the public schools. Her proposals every year has been, let's take all the federal monies that we are devoting to supporting low-income students achieving higher in public schools, let's take all of that money, she has proposed every year, and send it to private schools, which have no accountability as to who they select and who they reject. And believe me, that history is that they generally select high-income white students.
And that kind of trend, that kind of pattern, or that kind of policy, that kind of policy motivation that's being pushed by Betsy DeVos, that has its roots. You talk about this in Overturning Brown, and you lay out the history of this. That has its roots in the segregationist policies, the Jim Crow policies, even before Brown versus Board of Ed, of the South, of what we saw in the South and what was being battled against in the South. Talk about that, how that's, because it's very interesting, I think, and your book outlines this, how that's been able to go through this metamorphosis, right? This like Kafkaesque metamorphosis over the years, from something that's like openly and unapologetically segregationist and racist to something that's obviously a lot less openly racist, or at least openly bigoted, but is very shadowy, and it's sort of it's been framing and dressing itself as a rational policy prescription.
That's right. The part of the problem is that we remember the Southern segregationists through our modern notions of George Wallace, the segregationists who stood up there and said segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. The fact is, the segregationists who designed the private school choice movement in the 50s and 60s, in fact, they quickly learned and began to build two things in a private school funding. One was that they were going to make sure that private schools that got public monies did not have to account for whatever they did, so that they'd be free to discriminate. And the second was they stopped using the word segregation, and they stopped using the word race, and they essentially wiped out all of the statutes that said that kids were going to be sent according to race, and said it was going to be, they actually said, we're going to build a system in which we fund kids according to their needs. And you hear that today in the private school choice movement. We're just trying to build a system so every child gets its needs. Well, the segregationists used the same language. They quickly understood that if you admitted a token number of non-whites, then that would take you off the hook with the federal government, and therefore you could maintain a virtually segregated school. And if you always said you're trying to meet the needs of the student, even though all those students were usually wealthy white students, then you would confuse the public as to what the real motive was behind it. And look what's happened in 2020. We have a private school system movement in which we're putting public funds into exactly the same kind of segregated system that those segregationists in the South built in the 1950s and 60s. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and it is very troubling and jarring to kind of watch it unfold. But you look at, talking about some of those public school systems and looking at how they function over the years and looking now, so we have like public school systems in major urban centers like a Philadelphia, majority black school systems. And, people still, they're very dysfunctional. And so it's like, you and I can have sort of these big kind of highbrow policy conversations, and we need to, about what's happening with, dismantling or deconstructing the modern school choice movement. But then the parents are kind of feel like they're left in the lurch. They don't understand. They're just like, you know what, my kid or kids are in these dysfunctional, dilapidated school systems that aren't working. And so they're frantic and desperate, and they have to pull them out, and they got to put them in. They feel like I got to put them in a charter school. I need to find those monies or get a scholarship to put them in a private school. I'm one of those kids who got out of the Philly public school system on a wing and a prayer and got an opportunity to go to a private school, on a scholarship at some point. So, but how do we, it's hard, right? Like how do public schools these days try to get better, but they are faced with those funding issues, inequitable funding issues, but how do they craft or try to encourage a better business model so they can keep those parents in those systems?
Yeah. Well, I understand why some parents bail out of the public school systems.
Yeah.
There are schools that are not functioning well, and those who want to deny that are denying the reality that black parents and other parents face in schools. And I don't begrudge any parent for making a choice in whatever they think is individually the best interest of their child at that moment. Mm-hmm. What has to happen is this: we have to make education as important as we say it is in terms of state budgets, in terms of focusing. Part of the problem we have is that the public education advocates are spending time, as I have, trying to keep this new private, unaccountable system of publicly funded education from growing, so much so that we really haven't had a chance to really give improvement of the public school systems both the resources and the innovation that it needs. And so, even if my kids went to the public schools here in Atlanta, but even if I even if I sent my kid to private school on my own parental choice of what was good for him or her at that time, I still would say what I need to do is build a good public system, because a public system is accountable to the public. And when we build a private system, what we're saying is that those people who control the money control the choices.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a very important point. I mean, you can even make the argument that, kind of the inequitable sort of system that's been set up is designed, has been deliberately designed, right, Mr. Suits? That's deliberately designed to put black parents, to put Latino parents between a rock and a hard place, where after a while it's just so much stress and pressure on that already inequitable and crumbling public school system. You reach a breaking point where after a while, it's kind of like with the pandemic, we're worried now about whether or not vulnerable, low-income black and brown kids can even get an education at all in an environment like this.
Right, and what we realize and at this moment is there are a lot of challenges we have in the short term. But if COVID-19 has shown anything, it has shown that not only is the public school system essential for the education of our children, and we need to do better, but it's also essential for our economy. Unless we get a good functioning public school system, then and that are safe for our kids in the coming months, people are not going to be able to go back to work. They got to stay home with their kids. The emphasis we should say here is that we've got some short-term problems that we're going to have to work out on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. But what we should carry away in the coming years is let's build our public school system with the resources it needs to support individual kids who get the best education they strive to get, and it builds our economy so that we can, in fact, get back to full employment in this country.
We've been talking with Steve Suits. He's the author of Overturning Brown, the Segregationist Legacy of the Modern School Choice Movement. Go to newsouthbooks.com. That's the publisher for more information. I have my copy. You should get your copy too. Go to newsouthbooks.com for more information on Overturning Brown. It's an important, essential read. We've been talking with its author, Steve Suits, here on Reality Check. And definitely it's a fascinating conversation. I'm sorry I got to let you go. We actually came up on break, Steve, but we'll get you back at a later time because there's just so much that's happening in the education space. And definitely you had a parting thought there?
Well, I only to thank you.
Okay. Oh, no, thank you. No, thank you for your time. So we'll have you back for sure. Steve Suits, everyone. Go to newsouthbooks.com and get your copy of Overturning Brown, the Segregationist Legacy of the Modern School Choice Movement. Take care, Steve. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back on, we're going to talk with Thenjiwe McHarris of the Movement for Black Lives and going to talk about this Black Lives Matter moment that we're in right now. Coming up on Reality Check, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the Source lineup on Word Radio. Mondays, get ready for the rapping professor, Dr. Aaron Smith. On Tuesdays, it's Andrea Lawful Sanders. Then on Wednesdays, it's the Black Women's Leadership Council. On Thursdays, it's a second helping of Andrea Lawful Sanders. And on Fridays, it's Tiffany Bacon. Don't miss the Source. Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. and Fridays, 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. Exclusively on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live on wordradio.com and on the Word Radio app.
Do you need health insurance for your children? The Children's Health Insurance Program, also known as CHIP, provides quality, affordable health insurance for Pennsylvania kids. CHIP ensures that kids can go to the doctor, receive health screenings and vaccines, and get what they need to live a healthy childhood. Families can be covered by CHIP no matter how much money they make. If you've experienced a recent change in employment or income, CHIP may be a good option for your family. Visit chipcoverspakids.com to apply or learn more.
Paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
No fear, just facts. WURD.
Always Best Care is a great place to work. Flexibility,
leadership, purpose,
great benefits.
There's never a dull moment.
Diversity, inclusion, compasión.
We love our jobs. If you're looking for a great place to work, you can join our compassionate Team Green. You can apply online at teamgreenabc.com or call 267-909-9248.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
Okay, welcome back to Reality Check, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com. Also by Word TV and Word app as well. I will get to folks on Facebook Live very shortly. We did have a couple of interesting, good comments too about our previous Farming While Black conversation. Great conversation, and I'll kind of look at the calendar next weekend and see if we can bring that conversation back. Also bring back EcoWords Janine Kayembe to see if we can continue that discussion and see what other guests we can bring on too as well. We are waiting on. We don't have her yet. Thenjiwe McHarris, who's with the Movement for Black Lives, and they recently announced the Breathe Act, some legislation that's being introduced in Congress, the Breathe Act, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and also the Defund the Police movement that's taking place right now. So also the Movement for Black Lives announcing their Black National Convention in August. I believe that's going to be going. It's going to be going virtual, but a lot of activity that's happening there. So we're just waiting on her. 215-634-8065. Toll free. It is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065. Toll free. It is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Phone lines are opening, and while we wait on Thenjiwe McHarris of the Movement for Black Lives. And let's see if they come on with us soon, and so we'll continue that conversation. I'm looking forward to that conversation with her and see what they're up to and what this BREATHE Act is about. Something that's being introduced by a number of members of Congress, including the congressman out of Massachusetts, out of Boston, Massachusetts, Ayanna Pressley, leading the charge on that, along with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib out of Detroit, out of Michigan. They both kind of putting this this effort together and teaming up with the Movement for Black Lives. So we'll talk more about that and what that is. 215-634-8065, toll free. It is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let's go to some of these comments here on Facebook Live while we're waiting for that. Charmaine Johnson is saying that on Facebook Live, or to go to facebook.com/4word, I'm a vegan chef here in Philly and work with local farms to teach healthy cooking. Thank you for this conference. I will be reaching out to Black farmers organizations to partner. Can you provide their information again? Thanks. Once again, it's the Black Farmer Fund. They primarily focus in New York, blackfarmerfund.org, but I know that there's a number of other black farmers or urban farming collectives that are sprouting up. There's some in Philadelphia. A good place to start if you're in Philadelphia is obviously Bartram's Gardens, Sankofa Community Farm. So definitely go to bartramsgarden.org to get more information and to connect and reach out to the whom we partner up with quite a bit, the Sankofa Community Farm in Bartram's Garden. So that'd be a good place to start. There's a number of other organizations. We've had a couple of other organizations on before, and black farmers in the Philly area who've been on here. But Black Farmer Fund, I like where they're headed. I like that model. It's based in, it's focused on the state of New York, and but I like that model of like unifying, pulling resources together, and everyone being on the same page. And that power comes with numbers. It's not like scattered efforts. It's not like 10, 15, 20 different efforts. Everybody kind of doing their own thing on separate paths, but everyone sort of convening all under one umbrella and figuring out, okay, how can we pull all these resources together? How can we raise money? How can we, raise resources and funds and start taking this to the next level? So I think that that's very important in terms of what the Black Farmer Fund is doing. And to an earlier point, we really need to identify these organizations and figure out ways that we can invest in them, because these are like structural issues. These are, you can't have a persisting or surviving black community if folks aren't eating, right? So you need that food sovereignty, you need that food security. And so I like the kind of model where that's headed, at least the way that Alexandra Barlow was explaining it with the Black Farmer Fund up in New York is doing. So we promise that we'll bring back more discussion when we come back next week. Thenjiwe McHarris is with the Movement for Black Lives, and they recently announcing the introduction of the BREATHE Act, an omnibus bill legislation coming out of the House. Congresswoman or Congressmembers Ayanna Pressley out of Boston, Massachusetts, and also Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib out of Detroit, Michigan, teaming up with the Movement for Black Lives to present the BREATHE Act. So here to talk about that and other issues is Thenjiwe McHarris. She joins us by phone. Thenjiwe, how are you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time. So tell us, what is the BREATHE Act?
Sure. So the BREATHE Act is really answering the call and also speaking to the demand that we're hearing across the country, which is so many people from Black communities are calling for a divestment from institutions that harm us, and particularly policing and incarceration, and an investment into the needs of our communities, housing, health care, all of that. So that's what the BREATHE Act is. It's saying that the demands coming from the streets, that there's a responsibility for the federal government to also divest from harmful institutions and invest into the needs of Black communities.
What would that look like, in terms of, some of the particulars of the details in that? What would that, I guess a couple questions are, what would that divestment framework look like? And, what are some highlights out of the BREATHE Act, some new sort of structural ideas or adjustments that stand out, that make policing different in a BREATHE Act world that's different from sort of the policing that we get now?
Sure. So what the BREATHE Act would do, I mean, people are talking about more and more these days how much money actually goes to policing. I mean, we're talking about more than $100 billion annually going to policing. And what many people don't know is there's a good amount of money that's also coming from the federal government that is going to state and municipalities. And so what the BREATHE Act would do is essentially four things. One, it would divest from those federal resources that go towards incarceration and policing. Two, it would invest in new approaches to community safety, utilizing fund incentives. And so what that means is what we've been talking about as a movement, what many people are talking about is everybody deserves access to safety. Everybody deserves, when they have an emergency, when they have a crisis, being able to get the support that they need. Unfortunately, what we currently have does not meet the needs of so many Black people. And in fact, many times it also increases the amount of violence and the lack of safety. And so what we're saying is that we need to see actual investments into alternatives and new approaches, and we need a commitment from every level of government. Three, I would also allocate new money saved from the divestment and reallocate that money into federal grant programs that would actually go towards building healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities for all people. And lastly, the BREATHE Act talks about holding officials accountable, enhancing self-determination of Black communities. That's everything from like voting rights protection to accountability of elected officials. So the BREATHE Act is for us, it's comprehensive. It goes to how do we move away from what harms us and move towards what we need.
You using that issue, kind of the way it sounds to me, and that's why you make it as like an omnibus bill. It seems like, you're using this moment that we're having, this conversation, this national conversation, and angst over traditional policing in America, racist policing in America, as a jump-off point to address like these really ongoing, deeply systemic racism issues, these institutional racism issues, right? Like, okay, well, we have this moment, let's grab onto it, and let's use it to fundamentally not just overhaul or deconstruct policing as we know it, but hey, to finally address and deconstruct all these inequities and all this systemic racism.
Exactly. I mean, what we're doing really, and all we're doing is sort of following in the tradition of those that came before us that understood that all of these things are interconnected and that Black people deserve more than sort of the crumbs that are handed to us. And so for us, you can't, in a city like New York where you have significant homelessness, and oftentimes the response to homelessness is to police the homeless, as opposed to dealing with issues of poverty, issues of housing. And so you can't talk about one form of violence without talking about the other forms of violence. It's all interconnected, and it's what we mean by structural racism. And so if we're in a moment where we want to dismantle structural violence, structural racism, we want to dismantle the ways in which this country continues to harm, devalue, and criminalize Black lives, we actually need to deal with the many forms of state violence, which often looks like economic violence. And so that's what this bill is about. It's about how the United States of America spends money. And what we're saying, what we've been saying for years, what our elders said, what our ancestors said, oftentimes we find a country that invests more into harming Black people than to valuing the lives of Black people. And what we're calling for is a radical change of that.
If just now we're talking with Thenjiwe McHarris. She's a lead organizer with the Movement for Black Lives, and she's been joining us here on Reality Check. We're talking about the BREATHE Act and a number of other issues. Where can Thenjiwe, where can people go now? I mean, as far as like the Movement for Black Lives online, what's the best place for them to go to if they want to get more information on the BREATHE Act and how they want to get involved?
Well, first, if people do want to learn about the BREATHE Act, all you have to do is go to the breatheact.org. So just breatheact.org. If people want to find out more about M4BL, you go to m4bl.org. The last thing I'll just say is that the Movement for Black Lives is planning for a Black National Convention next month. It's going to be an important moment for Black people across the country. And if folks want to check that out, they would go to blacknovember.org.
Is that going to be mostly virtual? That conference? Yes, that's going to be a virtual event with Black people across the country. Considering the current conditions, we're all trying to figure out how do we be together when we can't physically be together. So that will be an opportunity where we're in community virtually. Now, there are concerns, and I hear this from a number of folks, whether it's at home in Philadelphia or elsewhere in the country, and there are concerns about, like, we've seen over the past couple of weeks, we've seen like these spikes, these increases in violence in a lot of communities. Philadelphia's been hit really bad with spikes of violence. There's also a very troubling, very alarming high rate of sexual assault, of rape that's happening in Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Chicago, Atlanta. Atlanta, that's becoming like a political flashpoint for that conversation about violence, internal violence that's happening in those communities. And people are wondering, they're like, well, we know that, like, the violence from police, that's a big problem, and we got to address that. We got to end that. But what sort of model are we looking at? Because obviously that traditional policing model is not working, but something's got to work. If we're going to fundamentally overhaul or defund police, what is that alternative community safety model that people can rely on? Because people now are at a point in certain places where they're afraid to go out. Even as they're trying to, maybe go out a little bit more with this reopening phase, so-called. But people are frankly a bit anxious and scared about some of the trends and patterns that they're seeing with violence over the summer. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just say a couple of different things. There's always peaks of violence, unfortunately, but in communities across the country. And I think these are important questions, because when we say defund the police and let's reimagine public safety, sometimes people jump to a particular conclusion that we're not thinking about safety overall. And in fact, that's exactly what we're talking about. What we know is that everybody deserves a centralized place or space that they can go and ask for help, whether it's a mental health crisis, whether it's like sort of a level of violent sort of crisis, whether it's domestic abuse, sexual assault. Everybody deserves to have access to safety and protection, everybody, and defense. And what we're saying is that the policing has been offered as one tactic, and often sometimes a failed tactic, particularly in Black communities, for the multiple different needs that people have across the country. And what we're saying is, we have to reimagine public safety in our country. I mean, generation after generation, I think there was always a time where it was hard for folks to reimagine something fundamentally different than what currently exists. But what we're saying is that if you had a wound and you kept, or different sort of ailments to your body, and you kept being given this one solution that oftentimes even made you sick, didn't always help. What you would, the alternative is to not try to figure out how this one solution, maybe we could tweak it, make it a little bit better. If this was your own body, it would be, I have to figure out what is going to make me well, and that's what we're saying. This country needs a mechanism, institution, ways in which to provide safety for people across the country. And I wrote about it in a New York Times piece recently. I said, what if we actually had a centralized rapid response infrastructure and locale and across the country where you can actually call a dispatch and you were deployed support and help based on what your actual need was. Mental health professionals, people with that experience with domestic violence, people had experience dealing with sexual assault, various different crises where the goal is harm mitigation and care, and also interruption when necessary and protection. And what we're saying is we can actually build that infrastructure, but what we need is investment at the local, state, and federal government. Black people shouldn't be a sort of a consequence or a sacrifice for a failed solution. What we're saying is that we can build something in this country. I want our children, generations from now, to have a choice when it comes to safety. And right now, I know they don't have a choice. They have a false choice. And so what we're saying is this is the moment. This is the moment, not that we just invest in it, but that we open up our imagination to say, what do we really need? And then let's start building it. Yeah, I think that's a very smart way of framing it. I think that's where the discussion needs to go. I appreciate you raising that too and addressing that, tackling that. That is that opportunity to really, in a very creative way, sort of reimagine, reillustrate how that's going to take place. I like the way you described it. This centralized rapid response framework or infrastructure, where people can call in, okay, you know what, there's not any kind of violent or armed moment that's going on here, but I'm having an episode. I'm having a I might be having a bipolar episode, and I need like a mental health, or my family member is having some sort of episode. I don't need the SWAT team to show up. I need mental health professionals to show up or show me where to access those mental health resources or professionals, and so on and so forth. It's just like, where you have municipalities now or other jurisdictions, they are making very rigid distinctions between 911 and 311. The municipalities in many cases themselves are saying, hey, stop calling 911 just to get your cat out of a tree. Call 311, right? So, why can't we make that same distinction when it comes to Black public safety needs or Black quality of life needs in certain Black communities, instead of like bringing out the whole armed brigade just to address those issues?
Right. And when you look at places like New York City, policing has it's $1 billion institution, the New York NYPD. We have the same kind of investments to other, like, to essentially supporting the needs of like mental health, domestic violence, sexual assault, violence interruption? How much investment goes into actually supporting, disrupting, care, protection, all of that stuff? We just don't have it. We have like this one solution, and it's increasing violence. I mean, there's like, it's like the old Martin Luther King quote: "Violence begets more violence." And so we're not. We say all the time, we live in it. We look at spikes like this. We talk about the level of violence we have in the United States compared to other places around the world. And the question is like, why does that exist? Yeah. What's contributing to that? Because it's not, like, and some could say, obviously, people go to Hollywood, people go to media, they go to sort of video games. There's like a number of different things that folks are pointing to, and not to say those are wrong, because I'm sure they're a contributing factor. But we also live in a violent society because the only sort of solution, the only justice, comes with a gun. And we have to, if we want something different, we have to invest in a different solution, and we need to invest in those that are suffering the most. It's alarming that, and I'll just end here, that in a place like New York City, during a pandemic where people are suffering financially, people are dying, particularly Black people at an alarming rate, that you have one housing development that is being patrolled by the police after police after police in the hallways, in the elevators, and around the housing development. That same housing development does not have gas. Sometimes does not have electricity. Like there's something morally wrong with a country where that happens way too often.
But how do you think, and I know you've heard this argument before, people pose it. I hear it posed all the time here, and I feel like, a point's being made, but it's hard. It's a tough question to go through. Where people are saying, okay, Black Lives Matter. Hey, we want you to be out there making noise about police violence or racist institutional violence against us. But then what about making noise about the violence that's like happening inside our communities, that's being inflicted on ourselves? Like, can we get that same kind of noise and focus and energy on that too? Kind of like equal amounts of energy and attention to that. People feel like that's sometimes that's being left out of that larger Black Lives Matter discussion. And I know you're privy to that. You hear that. And I know some people might think, well, that's kind of an unfair accusation or charge there. We're focused on all Black folks and trying to make it better for all of us. But people these are Black folks bringing it up. A lot of it's generational, but it comes out of a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. I don't know how do you address that?
Sure. I mean, I think two ways. One, to refuse to have it from a way that's soaked in anti-Blackness. And when I say that, I mean there is this tendency and condition to hyper-criminalize Black people in a particular kind of way, as if Black people are naturally more violent, as if like there is this like hyper-criminalization and making Black people so deviant that we're often forced into that conversation by people that do not have our interests at heart. And so because we don't talk about it that way, I think folks often think that we're actually not talking about violence internally, even particularly patriarchal violence, which we not only do but have to. What we're saying, though, is that there's some direct correlation to like all these forms of violence are interconnected, right? And so like in order to deal with the root causes of why, like what contributes to violence overall, we can't deal with it with like in terms of a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. We have to actually deal with one of the structural realities that contribute to violence and a lack of safety and a lack of protection. And then how do we invest in dismantling what contributes to violence internally and also from outside, from within? And then also, how do we create safer, sounder communities? I mean, and the truth is, like, we all know what keeps our communities safe. It's investment in what we need, and also we need investment in programs and measures that, like, keep the most vulnerable amongst us safe, whether particularly, like, we're thinking about women and queer folks and trans folks, in fact, and also sort of like young people in particular. We know like young people are a particular vulnerable class within our community. Many times in our communities, we know what keeps safe. It's investment in what the needs are, and investment in trying to like support efforts to mediate, to interrupt violence, to do a number of different, and also like provide care for those who have been harmed by that violence. And that's actually why we say the second part of the second thing I spoke about when it comes to BREATHE is an investment in community-based safety alternatives. It's like we're not avoiding that our community needs safety, but this one tactic that we're using, which is, okay, so send a whole bunch of more people with guns for every single crisis, is actually not dealing with the issue of violence at all. You know, it's actually contributing to violence.
We've been talking with Thenjiwe McHarris. I hope I pronounced that correctly, right? Thenjiwe?
Thenjiwe. You're doing good.
Thenjiwe. All right, excellent. Thenjiwe McHarris with the Movement for Black Lives. Go to m4bl.org for more information, and breatheact.org to learn more about the BREATHE Act that's just been introduced that the Movement for Black Lives is doing in conjunction with Congress members Ayanna Pressley and also Rashida Tlaib. Thenjiwe, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate this conversation. So we got to have you back, and I have to read. I did miss that New York Times op-ed, so I'll read that next time. Really appreciate your thoughts. Very insightful. We'll have you back again. Take care.
That's great. Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. Take care. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, phone lines are open at 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Pico has many ways to help you lower your energy usage and save money at home. Here's one. Have an old working fridge or freezer in your garage or basement? Pico will pick it up, dispose of it responsibly, and give you a $75 rebate. That's right, $75. Plus, you can save as much as $150 a year on your energy bill by getting rid of it. Just schedule your pickup at pico.com/recycling or call 1-888-5-PICO-SAVE today. Be sure your fridge or freezer is plugged in and working at time of pickup.
Be heard. Want another way to join the conversation? Follow us on social media using the hashtag onWURD. Be heard. Stay connected to Word Radio. Independent Black Media.
Times are changing, and you deserve a system designed to grow your business. Meet Jaxcom, the new standard in business class voice. Only Jaxcom gives you the most features per dollar. Things like visual voicemail, call monitoring, advanced call queues, virtual assistant, plus a lot more. The stuff the other guys charge you extra for or don't have. Jaxcom proudly supports Black-owned businesses. Reference WORD for 20% off any plan. Jaxcom. Visit us online at jaxcom.net. That's JAXCOM.net.
I ain't no better than you, and you ain't no better than me. But we all have something in common. We all are in species, seeds of God's creation.
Tune in to Messages in the Music every Friday night with Joey T, midnight to 6 a.m. right here on WURD.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Also, I see people, and that's good, people have connected with Janine Kayembe, the project manager for ecoword.com, on Facebook Live. So she left her email, ecoword@wordradio.com, ecoword@wordradio.com. So definitely, and she's addressing some specific questions people have about black farming and black farming organizations, collaboratives in Philadelphia. So that's a good place to start as well. So let me go to George out of Center City, who's calling for a Reality Check. George.
And how you doing, Charles?
Hey, what's happening?
It's funny you mentioned black farming because every time Dwight come on, that's all he talk about is farming. You know, community farming. You know, this and that. or we're going to put more laws in for make it harder for you to buy guns and this and that. Same old rhetoric, you know. But you, at least when you're talking about farming, you talk a little better than he did, man, because, boy, as soon as he come on, I just cut the radio off or walk away. Put something else on, because, boy, you talk about somebody who's dreary and boring. It's no information, no nothing out of him. It's just dry. You know, like you're in the desert and need water. He pours it in the desert.
Wow.
This is what I called you for, Charles, is that you really need to focus. When you focus on things change in this city, you know, because you go dead at it. You're not kissing up. You don't wear knee pads and chapstick, and I respect that. You know, some people have to keep that knee pads and keep that chapstick on, you know, for their future funding or their future job. You know, you don't have to do that for whatever apparent reason. They haven't gotten you to do that. But if they, you know, it's like Kenny did the right, well, not Kenny, Brian Abernathy did the right thing. He picked a woman from out of town that he can sit there. He's really the police commissioner. Everybody finally realized that after me telling them that for the longest, that he's the one who's calling the shots in the police department. That's why everything is so messed up. Because had he not been calling the shots downtown during that riot would have never took place. None of these businesses would have been looted in. And the proof in the pudding is that when Ross was there, right? When Ross was there, no matter how many demonstrations we had, they contained the problem. You know, they contained it and they looked at it. See, the good thing is, Charles, everything I say is in writing. I don't just be spilling off stuff that ain't in writing. I know how to go to the chief clerk's office and ask for anything I want. Anything you want to know is in writing. If you want to know who got your bills, where stuff, if you're a property owner, I want you to know it's hard as hell to kick people out of your place for not wanting to pay their rent. You can thank Helen Gim and Sherelle Parker for that, you know. And what's that new lady's name, the one that keeps coming in thinking everybody's supposed to live in your place for free? The Republican, the Independent, whatever. That's how far I forgot her name.
Kendra Brooks is not Republican.
Kendra, right.
Working Families Party.
That's the kind of stuff we should be paying attention to instead of talking about taking down statues and marching.
I agree with you on this, George. I mean, we're going to have to really focus on these structural issues, these quality of life and how people are living. You know, I'll be honest with you. I'm a bit exhausted from, like, the statue discussion. Like, I'm exhausted by it. Because I'm like...
You know what I like about that statue thing? They got what they got. They came to the table. They made an agreement, and Kenny gave them everything they wanted for that statue. Now, you can't go back to the table and renegotiate stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and George, no, thanks for that, George. I gotta let you go because I gotta get one more call. But I mean, I'm all for, especially like I've been saying, I've written about this for years, and people just finally caught up. I'm like, get rid of all the Confederate statues. I was writing about that back in like 2010, and write quite extensively. So I'm happy that there's like lots of, and the rebel flag and all of that stuff's it's coming down. But it's like we got to make sure, though, that I want to know about what's being done about people going hungry, people who can't pay their rent, people dealing with violence in the streets, people getting raped in cities like Philly, because the rape rate is up in Philly in a big way. There's a lot of real hurt and pain that people are feeling right now as we speak, as I'm talking on this radio. I want. That's what we gotta get focused on. You know, I want to get these kids fed. I want to make sure that these, if they gotta go back to school, these schools are safe and they're clean and they're getting taught. I want to make sure people are getting fed and they're getting quality food, solid food. I want to make sure people getting paid. I want to make sure people getting their rent paid. People are able to live in houses. People getting air conditioned. I mean, this is a whole passel of quality of life structural issues that we are just not getting focused on or talking about in a real big concerted way. We're living it. We're going through the pain of it. But those are the things we need to really discuss. Imani out of Germantown is calling in for a reality check. Imani?
Hi, Mr. Ellison. How you doing?
How you doing? All right.
Oh, good. Praise the Lord. Okay, we got another day. God is good. And I want to say that for my over 50 years old, I appreciate you. I want to lift you up, that you're being a light, you know, in a dark, you know, environment, people thinking negative. You got to bring that stuff up, because it'll only go down, like in Kevin Costner's role he told his daughter. She was a big time like gambler, and the Russians came down on her and beat her up. Well, anyway.
Oh, I remember seeing that movie. That was actually a great movie. Yeah, it was a great movie. Molly, right? Molly's Game. Yeah, that was a great movie. Yeah, I like that movie.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, I watched it with my daughter one day, and it was a good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very insightful. He said, you look down. He told her she was scared. You look down, that's where you're going to go. We cannot look down. This is not the time. And our ancestors, you know, they taught us like you know, in the hot summertime, you know, put ice, freeze ice bottles and put it on your neck. Stay hydrated. And we got to, you know, and the hydrogen peroxide 35% is the bomb. It will burn your skin, okay, but you need that kind of stuff. And pick them pine needles and make nice tea and slippery elm and marshmallow and cayenne and all that. You know what I mean? We need those soups and things like that.
Old school prescriptions, right.
Holla, you know.
It's from back home.
We need a powwow as far as I'm concerned. You know, a safe distancing powwow, a 72-hour powwow that shake all this stress. We got to stay away from that stuff.
Sister and Imani, you're preaching this afternoon, right?
I hear. You know, it's about life, not death. And I saw on NJK World, News, you know, put the children to work. Let them teach each other. You know, that's how they learn best. They don't learn best from an adult. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I wanted to put that out there. May God bless you. I love this beautiful spirit. Y'all keep on WRD. Y'all visionaries. And, you know, the founder, and you know what I mean, the cornerstone. I love y'all.
Yeah, we love you back. Thank you, Sister Imani. Thank you for that. That's a good last word of the reality check day and week. I appreciate that. Some words of wisdom coming from Sister Imani out of Germantown. That wraps this Thursday midday edition of Reality Check here on WURD. We got The Source with Andrea Lawful Sanders. That is coming up next, so keep your radio, your Philly radio dial locked in to the home of Black Talk Media, WURD 96.1 AM, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app. The Source with Andrea Lawful Sanders is coming up next. I remain on Twitter at twitter.com, at Ellison Report, hashtag reality check for more there. Also, hashtag EcoWord for clips, bits and pieces of our EcoWord conversation, Farming While Black, that we had earlier on. We're going to bring that back next week. So I'm going to see how we can work that out, and we'll let folks know. Once again, twitter.com, go to at Ellison Report. I want to thank Troy Wilmore, and you should too. Thank Troy Wilmore on the board is still behind the scenes. It's a lot of work making sure that we deliver this kind of information and conversation and intelligence to you each day. And Troy Wilmore, a big part of that. So I want to appreciate him throughout this reality check week. All right, Philadelphia and beyond, I want you to stay sharp, stay smart. But more importantly, please, especially now that it's hot, stay safe, stay cool out there. Stay cool out there, cool down. And that's not just physically, mentally too. Folks, we got to cool down as much as we can. Cooler heads will prevail, as they say. But I need y'all to stay safe and keep each other safe as best you can. And keep your kids safe too. All right? Please have a wonderful rest of the afternoon, evening, and rest of the weekend. As you know, Friday's reality check is off. So we will talk to you next Monday, 10 a.m. sharp, God willing. And looking forward to talking with you then. You take care.